The bedroom door was open 3 inches. That was all it took. Alara Voss had come home early because she forgot the earrings she'd planned to wear to her own engagement party. The hall was quiet. The apartment smelled like Dante's cologne, and something else, something she didn't name right away, because her brain hadn't caught up to what her body already understood. She pushed the door. 3 inches became 6. 6 became the full width of the frame. And there was Seraphine, her sister, her only blood, the woman who had stood beside her at every hard moment of her life, pressed against the headboard of the bed Alara shared with Dante Moretti, her head tipped back, her laugh low and unmistakable. Dante's hand was in Seraphine's hair. He hadn't even heard the door open. Alara stood there for 11 full seconds. She counted them later, the way people count strings when their mind is trying to escape the body. 11 seconds where she did not scream, did not collapse, did not become the woman she always feared she'd be in a moment like this, undone and loud and pitiful in her own doorway. She simply reached up, slid her engagement ring off her finger, walked to the nightstand, set it down, and wrote 2 words on the notepad beside the lamp. I saw then she... If you feel what Alara felt in that moment, that cold dropping silence when the people you trusted most become strangers in the span of a single breath, then this story is for you. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will shake everything you think you know about love, betrayal, and the price of second chances. Subscribe to this channel right now so you never miss another story like this one. Hit the like button and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. Alara Voss was not the kind of woman who made scenes. She had grown up learning how to be quiet about pain. Her mother had been a graceful, composed woman who believed that dignity required silence, and Alara had absorbed that lesson, the way children absorb everything without being taught it outright, just by watching and deciding, somewhere around age 9, that she would be the same. She was 31 when she walked out of that apartment in Rome with nothing but her coat, her keys, and 200 euros she kept folded in her inside jacket pocket out of a habit her mother had also given her. Always have walking away money, her mother had said. She'd meant it as practical advice about emergencies. Alara had never imagined this was what the emergency would look like. She didn't take her suitcase. She didn't call anyone. She walked 12 blocks to a cafe she didn't usually go to, sat at a corner table with her back to the wall, ordered a coffee she didn't drink, and stayed there for 4 hours while the city went dark outside. The engagement party started without her. She knew this because her phone lit up 43 times in the first 2 hours. Dante's name, Seraphine's name, Dante again. Then a string of calls from people she vaguely recognized as guests, Moretti associates, their wives, a few of Dante's cousins, who had the kind of loud, warm Italian family energy that Alara had once found overwhelming and had since grown to love. She turned the phone over so she couldn't see the screen. Around 9 o'clock, a woman at the table next to her asked if she was all right. Alara looked up and found herself staring at a stranger with kind, tired eyes and a shopping bag balanced on her knee. "You've been sitting there a long time," the woman said. Not accusatory, just observing. "I know," Alara said. "Bad night, worst of my life." The woman nodded. She didn't offer anything else. She finished her tea, gathered her bag, and left. Alara watched her go and thought, "That's what I want. To gather my things and leave." So she did. She took a night bus to Milan. From Milan, she caught a train to Zurich. She had a small savings account her mother had left her, one that Dante didn't know about, one she'd never touched 3 years of their relationship because she hadn't needed it, and also because some part of her, some stubborn, self-preserving part that she'd tried hard to ignore, had always wanted to keep something for herself. She emptied it in Zurich, just over 18,000 euros. It felt like an enormous amount of money and a terrifyingly small one at the same time. She bought new clothes. She dyed her dark hair lighter. She changed her last name to Carver using documents she was proud of obtaining, but wasn't sorry about either. She moved through 3 different countries in 6 weeks. Not running exactly, putting distance between with purpose. Putting distance between herself and the version of her life that had ended in that doorway. She never called Seraphine. She never called Dante. She had nothing left to say to either of them that wouldn't have come out broken and small, and she refused to give them that. What she did not know yet, what she wouldn't know for another 3 weeks, was that she was pregnant. She found out on a Tuesday afternoon in a pharmacy bathroom in a small Portuguese coastal town called Cascais. She sat on the closed lid of the toilet with the test in her hand and stared at it for a long time. The light in that bathroom was the particular kind of fluorescent that made everything look slightly worse than it was. The tile was cold through the thin soles of her shoes. Outside the window, she could hear the sound of the ocean, which she had come to find both calming and merciless, the way it kept moving regardless of anything that happened on land. She thought, this can't be happening. Then she thought, of course it's happening. Then she sat with it for another hour, and when she finally stood up and looked at herself in the mirror, she made a decision with the same quiet certainty that had carried her out of that apartment doorway. She was keeping it. She didn't examine why too closely. Some part of the decision was defiance at Dante, at Seraphine, at the life they had taken from her. But a larger part was something she couldn't quite name, a stubborn warmth in her chest that said, this is mine. This is the one thing that is entirely mine. She got a room in Cascais for the rest of the month. Then she paid for 3 more. Then she signed a 6-month lease on a small 2-bedroom apartment 2 streets from the seafront, with good light and no elevator, and a landlord named Senor Costa, who smelled like pipe tobacco and asked no questions. It was only when the midwife placed the ultrasound wand against her stomach 12 weeks later and said, I see 2 heartbeats, that Alara finally came close to breaking. Twins. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth and breathed through it. The midwife waited. She was a Portuguese woman in her 50s with short silver hair and a steadiness about her that Alara would come to be grateful for over the following months. 2 boys, the midwife said at a later appointment. Of course, Alara said, and surprised herself by laughing. She named them Roman and Elias. Roman came first, 7 minutes ahead of his brother, and arrived in the world with his fists clenched and his face already arranged in an expression of deep suspicion. Elias came second, quieter, with enormous dark eyes that immediately found Alara's face and stayed there. She held both of them in the hospital bed in the small Cascais maternity ward with no one beside her except the midwife and a young nurse who kept offering her water, and she thought, I am the only person on earth who knows these boys exist. That thought had 2 parts to it, and they pulled in opposite directions. The first part felt like power. The second part felt like grief so large she couldn't find its edges. She chose the power. She had to. There was no one else there to choose anything. The first 2 years were the hardest in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had imagined exhaustion and isolation and financial strain, and those things were all present and as difficult as advertised. But what she hadn't prepared for was the particular loneliness of watching her sons grow and having no one to turn to and say, do you see this? Do you see who they are becoming? Roman started walking at 11 months. He walked with complete confidence from the moment he decided to try. The way he seemed to approach everything total reluctance, followed by sudden total commitment, no in between. Elias walked 3 weeks later, slower and more careful, stopping to examine things at knee height that Roman had walked straight past. They were different in every surface way and identical underneath. They fought constantly and desperately needed each other. They were both stubborn in the specific way that made Alara occasionally catch a reflection of someone she was trying not to think about. She had built a life for them. She had a job she was good at translating documents and contracts, work she could do from home, work that paid well enough if she was careful and paid better when she pushed for more clients. She had neighbors she trusted in a limited way. She had Senor Costa, who had become something like a watchful uncle, leaving vegetables outside her door when he harvested from his garden plot, and once, when Roman was sick with a bad chest infection, sitting with Elias in the hallway for 2 hours so Alara could focus. She had built something real from nothing. She told herself this regularly, in the mornings before the boys woke up, standing at the window with coffee she actually drank now. You built this. It is real. It is yours. The boys turned 3, then 4, then somewhere between 4 and 5, they started asking about their father. It started with Elias. He had come home from the small international preschool Alara had enrolled them in and climbed up onto the kitchen counter while she was cooking, which he knew he wasn't supposed to do and did anyway when he had something to say. Mase, he said he'd picked up Portuguese the way children pick up everything, easily and without trying. Pedro's papa came to school today. I know, I saw him when I dropped you off. He lifted Pedro up, Elias said, like this. He demonstrated, raising his arms above his head. Alara kept stirring. "We don't have a papa," Elias said. It wasn't a question exactly. It wasn't an accusation either. It was a 5-year-old trying to organize information. "You have me," Alara said. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "But we don't have a papa." "No." "Why?" She had thought about this answer for years. She had entire conversations in her head at 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep, whole, careful explanations she had prepared and refined. And when the moment came, she said the thing that was actually true, and also the kindest version of true she could manage. "Your papa is somewhere else. He doesn't know where we are." Elias considered this. "Does he know we exist?" Alara took a breath. "No." "Oh," Elias said. He climbed down from the counter and went to find his brother. Roman asked about it that same night, sitting in the bath with his knees pulled to his chest. He was different from Elias in his questioning. Elias needed to understand, while Roman needed to know what to do with what he understood. "If he doesn't know we exist," Roman said, "can we find him?" "That's a complicated question, baby. Can we or can't we?" "I don't know yet." Roman looked at her with those eyes, Dante's eyes, exactly Dante's eyes, the dark, serious intensity of them, and said, "You know. You just don't want to say." She didn't answer him. She sat on the edge of the bath until the water went cold and helped him out and towelled him dry and read them both a story. And that night, after they were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table for a long time with nothing in front of her. She thought, how much longer can I keep them from the truth? She didn't have an answer. She didn't have a plan. She had never made a real plan, only survived each year as it came. What she didn't know was that someone else already had a plan. And he had been looking for her for 5 years. Dante Moretti was not a man who accepted losing things. He was 42, built like someone who had spent his life in rooms where the wrong decision had immediate physical consequences, with the kind of controlled stillness that his people in his world used instead of showing fear. He ran the Moretti organization the way his father had run it before him, with precision, with authority, with the absolute conviction that control was the only real safety there was. He had lost Alara. He had let it happen. He had spent 3 years telling himself that the night she was Seraphine's fault, then Alara's fault for leaving instead of fighting, then everyone's fault except his own. He had spent the next year and a half understanding, with the slow, terrible clarity of a man who couldn't stop thinking, that it had been his fault entirely, and that blaming anyone else was a thing he was doing to avoid sitting with that. He had ended things with Seraphine the same night Alara vanished. There was no confrontation, no drama. He simply called Seraphine to the apartment, told her what had happened, and said he never wanted to see her again. Seraphine had cried. He had waited for her to finish, and then he had asked her to leave. He felt nothing about this. He felt things about Alara constantly, at all hours, in the way he suspects some people felt chronic pain, not always sharp, but always present, always there underneath everything else. He hired investigators immediately after she disappeared. Good ones. The best available to someone with his resources and contacts. They found a trail of small transactions that stopped completely in Zurich, a cash withdrawal, a train ticket, then nothing. She had simply ceased to exist on paper. The investigators changed over the years. Some gave up. Some were quietly replaced. The instructions remained the same. Find her. Don't approach. Report only to me. He did not tell anyone in the organization what he was looking for. He did not explain to Marco Bellini, his most trusted lieutenant, why a portion of his considerable resources was permanently allocated to what appeared on the books as general security operations. Marco knew better than to ask. By year 4, Dante had stopped expecting to find her. He kept the search running because stopping it would have meant accepting something he was not capable of accepting. And then, in the spring of the boy's 5th year, a photograph arrived. It was taken on a street market in Cascais on a Saturday morning. The photographer, a quiet, careful man named Renato, who had been watching the town for 6 weeks on the basis of a document transaction trace that Dante's latest investigator had followed from Zurich through Lisbon to a coastal suburb, had taken it from across a market stall. The woman in the photograph had lighter hair than Dante remembered. She was thinner, or maybe just different shaped, the kind of body that had done things the one he remembered hadn't yet done. She was carrying a canvas shopping bag in one hand and holding someone's hand with the other. 2 someone's. Dante unfolded the photograph on his desk in Rome and stared at it for a long time. The boys were small, 5 years old, give or take, dark-haired like their mother. But there was something about the way the one on the left held his chin tilted up slightly, already defensive, already braced for world that Dante recognized in a way that went past thought, past analysis, landed somewhere deeper and older. He sat in his chair for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and told Marco he would be in Lisbon for a week. Marco said, "Should I arrange security?" Dante said not for this. He rented a car at Lisbon airport and drove himself to Cascais. He did not know what he expected to feel when he arrived. He had imagined this moment for 5 years, finding her, knowing where she was, and had never gotten further than the moment of discovery in his imagination, as if whatever came next was too complicated for his mind to construct in advance. He was not prepared for how ordinary her life looked. He parked down the street from the school on a Tuesday morning and watched from behind the wheel as the truce crowd of parents and children moved through the front gate. He was good at not being noticed. It was an occupational skill, and he watched without drawing attention. She came down the street on foot with both boys. The one he had already identified as Roman, the one with his chins, was talking with his hands. Elias had his mother's hand and was pulling her toward something she was not yet seeing. She bent down to Elias's level, said something. Elias pointed. She looked, then nodded, then guided both boys through the gate. She paused at the entrance and looked back up the street. For one moment, her gaze moved across the line of parked cars. Dante sat completely still. She didn't see him, or if she did, he was just another man in another car, nothing remarkable, nothing that looked like the past arriving in the present. She went through the gate. He sat in the car for another 20 minutes before he started the engine. He drove back to the hotel he'd rented under a different name and sat on the edge of the bed and put his face in his hands and stayed that way for a long time. He had found her. She had made a life, a real one. With 2 children who were his, he was as certain of this as he had ever been certain of anything, and she had done all of it without him, despite him, probably despite him on some level, and it was the best possible version of something he had done a terrible thing to create. He thought about walking away. He spent 2 days thinking about walking away, sending money anonymously, keeping the search team in place to monitor her safety from a distance, never showing her his face. He could do that. He was capable of that. He had been capable of much harder things, but Roman's chin was his. And Elias's eyes had found Alara's face in the hospital room in a way Dante could only imagine, but the photograph of the boy's open and searching gaze, even in a street market, even from across a stall, was something Dante could not unknow. Those were his sons. He did not walk away. He made contact through Senor Costa. He did not do it directly. He had a mutual contact in Lisbon who knew the old man socially, who arranged a quiet conversation, who relayed a single message. Someone who knows Alara Carver would like to speak with her. He means no harm. He will wait. When Alara opened her apartment door 2 days later, she did not look surprised. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this particular knock for 5 years, who had rehearsed her face for it, who had decided what expression she would wear, and had practiced it until it was convincing. "How long have you known where I am?" she said. 18 days, Dante said. "And before that, I've been looking for 5 years. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked older, she thought. Not deteriorated, still the same contained, careful presence she remembered, but older, in the way that something had worn at him, that the years had not passed easily. "You should have stayed lost," she said. "I know." "Then why didn't you?" He looked down the hall past her shoulder, and she knew what he was looking for. "They're at school," she said. "I know. I've watched the school." He paused. "I've been careful. You've been watching my children." "Our children, Alara." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything they had not said for 5 years, and it pressed against the walls of the hallway and filled the space between them completely. "You have no right to that word," she said. "I know that too." She stood in the doorway for another moment. Then she stepped back and let him in. It was the hardest thing she had done since the night she walked out. Harder in some ways because that night she had still been able to convince herself that she was walking away from nothing worth keeping. This was different. This was walking towards something she had spent 5 years trying to outrun. And the terrible thing, the thing she couldn't say out loud, was that part of her recognized him the way you recognize a place you've tried to forget but haven't. They sat at her kitchen table with coffee between them and the sound of the ocean somewhere beyond the windows, and he told her everything he had told himself he would tell her. He did not excuse what happened with Seraphine. He did not explain it or contextualize it, or offer reasons she might find comforting. He simply said, "What I did was unforgivable. I've never stopped knowing that." "That's not an apology," she said. "No. An apology would be telling you I'm sorry, and I am, but I think you already know that, and it doesn't help." She looked at him. "What does help?" "I don't know." "I was hoping you'd tell me." She almost smiled. Not warmly, it was closer to the expression people make when something is grimly funny and they resent the humor of it. "You came all this way hoping I'd tell you what to do." "I came all this way because I needed to see that you were alive," he said. "The rest of it I don't know. I genuinely don't know." She looked at her coffee cup. "They're going to ask about you." "I know." Roman already asked. Something moved across his face. Just for a moment. Then it settled back into the controlled stillness. But she had seen it. "What did you tell him?" "That you didn't know where we were. That you didn't know they existed." She looked up. "I didn't tell them why." "Why not?" "Because they're 5 years old," she said. "And because they love a father who doesn't exist yet, and I wasn't ready to replace him with the real one." Dante was quiet for a moment. "What's the real one?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's the whole problem." He was still in Cascais when the threat arrived. He hadn't told her about the Ravello Syndicate. He hadn't wanted to introduce that dimension of his life into the fragile space they were trying to negotiate. He had monitors in place, people watching the town, and he had believed incorrectly, as it turned out that no one outside his immediate circle knew where he was. Someone had talked. Marco called on a Thursday morning early, while Alara was doing the school run. "We have a problem," Marco said. Dante said, "How close?" Two men arrived in Cascais yesterday. We've confirmed they're Ravello." Dante was already moving toward the window, scanning the street. "They're not there yet," Marco said. "But they know she's there, and they know she matters to you." Dante said nothing for a moment. "Pull everyone in," he said. "I want coverage on the school and the apartment from this moment. If they move toward either, I want to know before they're within 2 blocks." He called Marco back before the boys were home from school. And then he had to tell Alara. She took it with the same composed stillness she'd used in every difficult moment he'd witnessed, jaw set, eyes steady, hands flat on the table in front of her. He watched her process it and knew she was furious and scared in equal measure and was refusing to let him see either. "This is your world," she said. "Yes, you brought it here." "They would have found you eventually," he said. "The moment I knew where you were, there was always a risk that someone watching me would figure it out too. I'm sorry, that's on me. Stop apologizing and tell me what happens now." "I move you somewhere safer. I built a life here." "I know. My landlord, Senor Costa, can be reached wherever you are." She stood up from the table and walked to the window, and he watched her look out at the street and the sea beyond it and the life she had constructed without him. And he understood with a clarity that cost him something, that she was not angry at Ravello. She was angry at him for being the person whose existence had made her life dangerous. He didn't defend himself. She turned back around. "The boys come home at 3, she said. "I'm not telling them anything until they're home, and I've had time to think." "Of course. And I'm not going anywhere you tell me to go. If we move, I decide where." "All right." She looked at him for a long moment. "You should know," she said, "that whatever happens with the safety situation with all of this, it doesn't change anything between us. It doesn't make you their father in any way that matters." "I know that," he said. "You're going to have to earn that." "I know." She looked at him once more. Then she turned back to the window. 3 o'clock, she said. "We'll talk more after 3. He sat at her table and waited, and outside the Portuguese morning moved on without concern for anything happening inside that apartment, and the ocean kept doing what it did, and the town went about its ordinary life. When the boys came home, Roman walked in first. He stopped inside the door. He looked at the man sitting at his kitchen table. His eyes were exactly the dark, measuring eyes that Dante had spent the last 3 weeks seeing in a photograph and trying to prepare for. "Who are you?" Roman said. Dante looked at the boy for a moment. Then he said, "My name is Dante. I'm a friend of your mother's." Roman looked at him for another 3 seconds. Then he looked at his mother. "He's not a friend," Roman said. "He looks like us." Alara put her hand on Roman's shoulder. "Come inside," she said quietly. "We need to talk." Roman kept his eyes on Dante. Elias behind him had gone completely still. And in the silence of that small Portuguese kitchen, with the ocean outside and the afternoon coming in through the open window, something shifted in the air between all of them, some arrangement that had held for 5 years. Carefully constructed and carefully maintained, finally and irreversibly done. Roman didn't move from the doorway. He stood there with his backpack still on his shoulders, and his shoes still on his feet, which Alara had told him 100 times to take off at the door, and he looked at Dante Moretti with the particular focused attention of a 5-year-old, who he has already decided that the adult in front of him requires examination before trust. Elias had pressed himself slightly behind his brother, not hiding, watching. Dante didn't stand up. He understood in the way that careful men understand tactical situations that rising to his feet in that moment would feel like a threat to both the woman and the boys. Stayed seated, hands visible on the table, and met Roman's gaze directly. "He looks like us," Roman said again. Not to Dante. To his mother. "Come sit down," Alara said. "He looks exactly like us," Roman said. "Around the eyes." "Roman, I'm just saying what I see." Elias came around from behind his brother, then, moving the way he always moved quietly, with more intention than you'd notice at first. He walked to the kitchen table and pulled out the chair across from Dante and sat in it and folded his hands on the table the way Alara did when she was having a serious conversation. "Are you our papa?" Elias said. The question landed in the room like something dropped from a height. Alara started to speak. Dante said yes. She stopped. Roman made a sound not quite a word, more like the beginning of one that he swallowed, and his hands tightened on the straps of his backpack. Elias looked at Dante for a long moment. Then he looked at his mother. "You said he didn't know we existed," Elias said. "He didn't," Alara said. "Until recently." "How recently?" 3 weeks ago. Elias processed this. He was the kind of child who processed things visibly. You could watch the information moving through him. "So he came to find us," "Yes." "Because he wanted to?" Alara looked at Dante. Dante said yes, because I wanted to. Roman walked to the table then. He didn't sit down. He stood at the end of it with his hands still on his backpack straps and looked at Dante the way you look at something you're deciding whether to trust or throw out. "Where were you before?" Roman said. "Rome. Italy." "Why weren't you with us?" The silence stretched. "That's a long answer," Dante said. "I have time," Roman said. Alara pressed her fingers against the side of her mouth. She had known this moment was coming for 5 years, and she still had no idea what the correct version of it looked like. There was no correct version. There were only versions that did more or less damage, and she was standing in the middle of one, watching it happen in real time without any ability to stop it. "Your mother and I had a disagreement," Dante said. "A serious one. She left, and I didn't know where she went. By the time I found her, you were already 5 years old." Roman stared at him. "What kind of disagreement?" Roman Alara started. "An adult kind," Dante said. "The kind that's between your mother and me, not something you need to carry." Roman's jaw shifted. He looked at his mother. "Did he hurt you?" The question was so direct and so serious, coming from a face that small, that Alara felt something go tight in her chest. "Not the way you mean," she said carefully. "What way then?" "The kind that's hard to explain," she said. "The kind that grown-ups make. Mistakes." Roman looked back at Dante. "You made a mistake." "Yes, a big one." "Yes." Roman considered this for a moment. Then he took his backpack off, set it on the floor by the wall, and sat down at the table. "Okay," said, "it's not warm, not cold. Provisional in the way only children and very experienced negotiators can be provisional." Elias reached across the table and touched the back of Dante's hand. Just once, just briefly, a small 5-year-old hand on a large adult one. "We have the same eyes," Elias said. "I noticed that too," Dante said. Alara made dinner that night because having something to do with her hands was the only way she knew how to hold herself together. She made the pasta the boys liked, the simple one with olive oil and parmesan that she could make in her sleep, and she listened to the sounds from the living room where Dante was sitting on the floor. He had moved from the chair to the floor without being asked, following some instinct she hadn't expected from him, while Roman explained, with complete seriousness, the rules of a card game he had invented himself. The rules were complicated and partially inconsistent, and Roman enforced them selectively. Dante played along without apparent frustration. Elias sat beside Dante and contributed amendments to the rules, which Roman accepted about half the time. She stood at the stove and watched this through the open kitchen doorway and felt something she did not have a clean name for. It wasn't softening, exactly. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something more uncomfortable than either of those, a recognition that this man on her living room floor was genuinely present in a way she hadn't let herself expect, and that it was going to make everything harder. She had built her understanding of Dante around the night in the doorway. She had needed that fixed point to leave, to survive, to build something else. If he became complicated again, if he became the fuller version of the person she had once loved, she didn't know what that did to the architecture she'd spent 5 years constructing. She put the pasta on the table and called them in. Roman arrived first, already mid-sentence about something, sat down, and immediately told Dante that he put too much parmesan on his helping. Elias arrived second, climbed into his chair, and looked at the arrangement of people around the table with an expression of visible satisfaction, as if something had been assembled correctly. Alara sat down last. They ate dinner. The boys talked mostly at Dante about school, about the beach, about a cat that had started visiting their building, that Roman wanted to name Vicente, but Elias wanted to call Peixe, which meant fish, because it smelled like one. Dante listened. He asked questions that showed he had actually listened. Roman revised his opinion of the questions downward when one of them suggested Vicente was the better name, then revised it back up when Dante also acknowledged that Peixe was more accurate. It was an ordinary dinner in every surface way, and it was the most disorienting evening of Alara's adult life. She put the boys to bed at 8:30. She told Dante to wait. He waited. She sat on Roman's bed while Roman, who never went to sleep easily, went through his ritual of unnecessary questions. Was the window locked? What was the weather tomorrow? Had she remembered to charge his library book? And she answered all of them with the specific patience that only exists between parents and children who know each other's rituals exactly. Is he staying? Roman asked at the end. Tonight? Or in general? I don't know yet. Roman looked at the ceiling. I'm not sure about him. That's okay. Elias likes him already. Elias likes most people, that's true. Roman was quiet for a moment. He doesn't talk like I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone who makes excuses. He turned his head to look at her. He didn't make excuses. No, she said, he didn't. That's something, Roman said. Then he turned over, which was his way of ending conversations, and Alara sat with him for another few minutes in the dark before she went across to Elias. Elias was already mostly asleep. She sat on the edge of his bed and he opened his eyes halfway. Ma, he said, I like him. I know you do. Are you mad at you? No, at him. She smoothed his hair back. Go to sleep. You're not answering. Sleep, Elias. He closed his eyes. It's okay to like him too, he said, almost inaudible. She sat there until his breathing evened out. Dante was in the kitchen. He had washed the dinner dishes. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the clean counter, the stacked bowls. This man standing in her kitchen with a dish towel in his hand, and something compressed in her chest and came out as anger, because anger was more manageable than whatever else was sitting underneath it. Don't, she said. He looked at her. Don't what? Don't do the dishes. Don't sit on the floor with them. Don't, she stopped. She pulled in a breath. Don't make this something it isn't. I washed the dishes, Alara. That's all. That's not all, and you know it. She walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter with her arms crossed. You know exactly what you're doing. You're charming them. You're making yourself necessary. I just met them. And in 4 hours, Elias is already attached to you. Because you knew how to sit on the floor. Because you knew how to play a card game with bad rules and not complain about it. She shook her head. You haven't changed. You're still doing the thing where you figure out what people need, and then you become that thing. He set the dish towel down. He didn't raise his voice. He said, what would you have me do instead? Sit at the table in a suit and be formal and distant and give them a reason to distrust me that I then spend the next year trying to overcome. I'd have you be honest. I was honest. When Roman asked if I'd hurt you, I didn't lie. You said not the way he meant, which is true, which is also a redirect. He was quiet for a moment. What would honest look like exactly? You tell me. Because I'm genuinely asking. I don't know how to walk into a situation like this and not get it wrong. I've been getting it wrong for 5 years by not being here, and now I'm here and you're telling me I'm getting it wrong by trying. I'm not telling you. You are, he said. Not loud. Very steady. You are telling me that. And I understand why. I understand that you don't trust anything I do right now, and I understand that every move I make looks calculated through the lens of what I did. I get that. But at some point, you have to decide whether you want me to try or whether you want me to fail, because I can't do both. She stared at him. He looked back at her. The kitchen was quiet, and the apartment was quiet, and outside the ocean was doing its relentless thing. You need to leave tonight, she said. I'm not ready for you to be here in the morning when they wake up. All right, and we need to talk tomorrow without them. All right, about what happens next. The safety situation? The all of it. I'll be wherever you tell me to be. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He moved toward the door. She stayed at the counter. He stopped. Roman said you didn't make excuses. He waited. He noticed. She said, that's not nothing. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded once, and he left. And she stood in her clean kitchen alone and listened to the sound of her own breathing and tried to figure out what she was going to do. She called him at 8 the next morning, after the school run. She had spent the night somewhere between sleep and not sleep, the kind of night where you're horizontal, but your mind is entirely upright and working hard on problems that don't have solutions. She had made a list in her head, then she had taken it apart. Then she had rebuilt it differently. By 7 a.m., she had arrived at something that was not a plan, but was at least a direction. I want you to meet me at the cafe on the corner of Rue du Furl, she said when he picked up. Not my apartment, neutral ground. 20 minutes, he said. He was already there when she arrived. She didn't know whether to find that irritating or reassuring and decided to find it neutral until she had more information. She sat down across from him and put her hands around her coffee cup and said, "Tell me about Ravello." He told her. Not everything she knew, there were layers he was summarizing, rather than exposing, but enough. The Ravello Syndicate, the history between the two organizations. The particular reason that Alara, as the mother of Moretti children, now represented leverage that Ravello would use if they could access it. How long have they known where I am? She asked. We're not sure. The two men Marco identified arrived 3 days ago. They may have followed me from Rome, or they may have found the trail independently. And your answer is to take me back to Rome. My answer is to take you somewhere safe. Rome is safest because I can control that environment. But it doesn't have to be Rome if you have another preference. My preference is to stay here. I know, this is my home. I know that, my boys are settled here, they have school. I know, he said again. I know all of that. And I'm not dismissing it. But I need you to hear what I'm saying about the risk, Alara. These are not people who will be careful about collateral damage. She looked at him. When you say collateral damage, the boys, he said. He said it flat and direct. They know about the twins. Or they will. That's the leverage. Not you, specifically you plus the boys together. She was quiet for a moment. The cafe hummed around them. A couple argued softly 2 tables over. A child knocked a juice glass off a table and a parent swooped for it. If I agree to go to Rome, Alara said, I need it to be absolutely clear that I am not going back to your life. I'm going under protection. I'm not becoming your partner. I understand. You need to say it back to me. He looked at You would be there under my protection. Your own space, your own rules, complete autonomy over your life and your decisions. I would not ask anything of you beyond what you're willing to give. And if I decide after a month that I want to go somewhere else, then I would help you find somewhere else and keep the protection in place. She pressed her thumb against the ceramic of the cup. The boys would want to see you, she said. I can't prevent that. I won't try to. But I set the terms for when and how. Yes, and you don't tell them things without discussing them with me first. You don't make promises to them without running them past me first. Yes, and Seraphine, she stopped. She hadn't planned to bring this up yet. But it was there, suddenly, requiring acknowledgement. She doesn't come near my children. Ever. His face did something complicated. I haven't spoken to Seraphine in 5 years. I don't care. She doesn't come near them. She won't, he said. That's already true. Alara nodded. She looked out the window at the street. The ordinary Cascais morning moving past the glass. People going to work, going to market, living lives with no particular drama in them. I hate this, she said. I know. I hate that you being here makes sense right now. I hate that you're the reason we're not safe and also the person keeping us safe. I hate that. You can hate it, he said. You're not wrong. I don't need your validation. I'm not offering it. I'm just agreeing with your read of the situation. She looked back at him. When? As soon as possible. Tomorrow if you can manage the packing. She thought of the apartment. The landlord. The midwife who had become something close to a friend. The school where the boys had learned to navigate Portuguese and had friends whose names she knew and parents who sometimes waved to her at the gate. Give me 2 days, she said. 2 days, he said. She told Senor Costa that evening. The old man sat across from her at his own kitchen table and listened without interrupting, which was one of his better qualities. And when she finished, he was quiet for a while. Italy, he said. Yes, with him. Under his protection. It's different. Senor Costa made the face he made when he disagreed with something, but understood he didn't have the full picture. You've been here 4 years, I know. The boys know this town. I know. They'll adjust, he said after a moment. Children adjust. What doesn't adjust is the thing that makes a parent do a stupid thing out of pride when the right answer is obvious. She looked at him. Are you telling me this is the obvious answer? I'm telling you that Case will still be here, he said. And I will still be here. And the boys know where home is. He folded his hands on the table. Go keep them safe. Come back when it's over. She nodded. He reached across and patted her hand once, briefly the way he always did when he had nothing else to offer and was offering it anyway. Marco Bellini arrived the following afternoon. Alara had heard the name for years, Dante's second, the man who ran the operational side of things. She had built an image of him in her head over 5 years of Dante's stories, solid, efficient, probably humorless, probably older. He was 38. He had a narrow face and quick eyes, and moved with the particular efficiency of someone who conserved everything words, energy, expression, and spent it carefully. He looked at Alara with an assessment that was not unkind, but was absolutely professional. We have a vehicle outside, he said. 2 more at the perimeter. We're driving to Lisbon and flying commercial under alternate documentation. You've arranged documentation for me and the boys? It's already done. She didn't ask how. Some details she had decided she was not going to interrogate. Dante was at the door behind Marco. He looked at Alara's apartment, the packed bags, the stripped beds visible through the bedroom doorway, the bare kitchen counter, and something crossed his face. She saw it and chose not to name it. Ready? He asked. No, she said. Let's go. The flight to Rome was 3 hours. Roman sat between Alara and Dante and spent most of it looking out the window. He asked Dante, at some point over the Alps, what those mountains were called. Dante told him. Roman looked at them for a while longer and then said, without preamble, are there bad people coming to hurt us? Alara felt her stomach drop. Dante said there are some people who might try. That's why we're going somewhere I can protect you better. Did you make them bad? Roman asked. Alara closed her eyes briefly. Some of the bad things they do are connected to me. Yes, Dante said. That's part of what I'm trying to fix. Roman looked at him. How long does it take to fix something like that? Longer than I'd like, but you're working on it. Yes. Roman turned back to the window. Okay, he said. Same tone as the night before. Not warm. Not closed. Elias, across the aisle with a window seat he'd claimed with complete confidence, was asleep against the glass. Alara looked at the back of Roman's head and thought, he is 5 years old, and he is already trying to decide how much of his father he can afford to trust. The thought was so sad it felt like something physical. She pressed her forehead briefly against the seat in front of her. Dante did not reach across to touch her arm. She was grateful for that. Moretti Estate was 40 minutes outside Rome. Alara had heard it described in the years when she and Dante were together, but she had never seen it. It was large. The way things built over several generations of wealth and power are large, not showy, exactly, but settled into its own scale, with stone walls and gravel drives and rooms with high ceilings that felt like they were built to contain important conversations. She hated it on sight, not because it was oppressive, it wasn't. It was almost beautiful in the late afternoon light. She hated it because it felt permanent, and she had spent 5 years building a life that was hers alone, and this was unmistakably someone else's, Dante's family's, Dante's history, Dante's weight in stone and gravel. She was shown to rooms on the east wing, separate entrance from the main house. The boys' rooms were across a short corridor from hers. She had insisted on this specification through Marco before they left. Good light. They smelled clean and unused. Roman stood in the middle of his room and looked around. It's very big, he said. Yes, my whole apartment in Cascais could fit in this room. Almost. That's weird. Yes. He sat on the edge of the bed, tested the mattress. It's good, though, he said, in the tone of someone being fair against their instincts. Elias had already found the window in his room that looked over the garden and was giving Alara a detailed account of what he could see. She stood in the doorway between the two rooms and listened to her sons, adjusting to a world she had spent 5 years protecting them from, and thought, this is either the safest decision you've ever made or the most dangerous, and you won't know which for a while. 3 days into the estate, she hadn't spoken to Dante beyond functional necessities logistics. The boys' schedule, whether the kitchen staff could manage the specific pasta the boys would actually eat. He hadn't pushed for more. He gave her the space he'd promised. What she hadn't anticipated was Marco. She was in the library on the second morning, working through a translation contract that her client had emailed before the move. She hadn't told them anything, just said she was relocating temporarily, because the work had to continue regardless when Marco came in without knocking. She looked up. He closed the door behind him. I need to tell you something, he said. Does Dante know you're telling me this? No. She closed her laptop. Sit down, he sat. He didn't arrange himself the way most people arrange themselves before difficult conversations, no crossing of legs, no leaning forward. Just sat straight in the chair with his hands on his knees. Ravello didn't find you by following Dante, Marco said. She looked at him. We traced it back. The information about Cascais came from inside, he said. Someone in the organization gave Ravello your location. The room was very still. Who, she said. We're not certain yet. We have 3 possible sources. Dante is handling it. He knows. Yes, since this morning, and he didn't tell me. He was going to tonight, I think. Marco's jaw moved slightly. I thought you should know before tonight. So you have time to think about what it means before he frames it for you. She looked at him steadily. Why are you doing this? Because you're the mother of his children and you deserve the full picture. He paused. And because Dante is good at framing things in ways that are technically true and directionally convenient, and you should be able to account for that. Alara leaned back in her chair. There was a leak inside Dante's organization. Someone who had looked at the intelligence about Cascais, about her sons, and had handed it to the people most likely to use it against them. And Dante had known for hours and had not told her. How serious is the internal situation, she asked. Serious, Marco said. We don't know how deep it goes. Which means the estate may not be as secure as we're addressing it. But I won't pretend the picture is clean. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you, she said. He stood up, moved toward the door, and then stopped. He's not trying to deceive you, Marco said. I want to be clear about that. He was going to tell you. Was going to manage how he told me, she said. Marco looked at her. Yes, I know, she said. I know how he operates. Thank you, Marco. He left. She sat in the library with her closed laptop and the high ceilings and the weight of someone else's house pressing down on her. And she thought about the leak, and she thought about what it meant that even inside Dante's controlled and carefully ordered world, someone had looked at her sons and seen a weapon. She thought, you came here for safety, and there's a crack in the wall you can't see yet. When Dante came to find her at 6 o'clock, she was waiting for him. She said, tell me about the leak. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at her for a moment, and she watched him recalibrate. She could see it, the small adjustment, the decision. Marco told you, he said, yes. I know, she said. Sit down, Dante. I want the full version, not the managed one. He came in and sat across from her and told her. The full version was worse than Marco's summary, which she had expected. 3 possible sources, all of them close enough to Dante's operational center to have accessed the intelligence about Cascais. One of them had been with the organization for 12 years. Do the boys know any of this, she asked. No, and they won't. If you can't confirm the source, we will confirm it, he said. I have people on it. It's a matter of days. And until then, we are in the safest location I can provide, and the security is doubled. She looked at him. I want a plan, she said, not reassurance. An actual plan. What happens if you identify the source and it goes deeper than you expect? What happens if Ravello decides not to wait and moves on the estate? What is the actual plan, not the version where everything works? He was quiet for a moment. If the breach goes deep, we move again, he said, to a secondary location that only Marco and I know. If Ravello moves on the estate before we confirm, we have extraction protocols in place. The boys would be out within 4 minutes, you within 6. 4 and 6 minutes.
Yes.
That's tested, that's tested. She breathed out. Alara, he said. Don't. I wasn't going to hide it from you. But you were going to manage it, she said. There's a difference between hiding and managing, and I know you know the difference, and I need you to stop treating me like someone who needs to be managed. He looked at her for a long moment. You're right, he said. I know I'm right. No more managing. Whatever I know, you know. She held his gaze for another moment, checking it the way you check the load-bearing quality of something before you put weight on it. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Outside the library window, the Italian evening was turning the garden gold. And somewhere in the east wing, she could hear the boys arguing about something that sounded like the cat situation again, whether to name any future cat they encountered Vicente or Pesce. And the argument was so ordinary, so completely her life superimposed on this other, more dangerous life, that she almost laughed. She didn't. She looked at Dante. I need you to understand something, she said. I am not afraid of your world. I have been managing your world from the outside for 5 years, and I am not afraid of it. What I am is unwilling to have my sons inherit it. I understand that, do you? Yes, she leaned forward slightly. Because the way you fix the leak, the way you handle whoever inside your organization chose to sell my children's location to your enemy, that sets a tone. And if the tone is violence, I need to know that. He was quiet for a moment. What I do with the source will be whatever is necessary to ensure it doesn't happen again, he said. I won't pretend otherwise. Then I need you to also be working on what happens after, she said. What happens to this organization, to your position in it, to the thing the boys would walk into if they grew up in it? I need that to be a question you're actually thinking about. He looked at her. The library was very quiet. It's a question I've been thinking about for 3 years, he said. She hadn't expected that. She looked at him and found that the look on his face was not a performance. It was the same look Roman made when he was being fair against his instincts, reluctant and genuine in equal measure. Then we'll talk about it, she said. Not tonight. But soon. He nodded. They sat in the library a while longer as the light changed outside and the boys' argument resolved itself. She could tell by the abrupt silence, which always meant one of them had conceded or found something more interesting, and the estate settled into the particular quiet of a large building at the end of a day. She thought, you are in his house, in his world, and you came here because there was no safer option. And the problem is that every day that passes in this place, you are going to understand him better, and understanding him better was not supposed to be part of the plan. She thought, there is no plan anymore. What she did not yet know, what she could not have known, was that the following morning, before breakfast, Marco would come to Dante's study with a name. The leak had a face, and the face belonged to someone Alara had already met. The name was Luca Ferrante. Marco laid a single photograph on Dante's desk at 7:41 in the morning, before the estate had fully woken up, before the kitchen staff had finished with breakfast, before the boys had come out of their rooms. The photograph was surveillance quality grainy, taken from distance, but the face was unmistakable. Dante looked at it for a long time without speaking. Luca Ferrante was 34 years old. He had been with the Moretti organization since he was 22, brought in by Dante's father in the last year of the old man's life as a junior courier, promoted steadily through a decade of reliable work, trusted with increasingly sensitive operational details, until he had become, in the last 2 years, part of the small inner circle that had access to Dante's personal security intelligence. He had been at the estate 3 days ago. He had been introduced to Alara in the front hall. When she arrived, a brief, unremarkable introduction. A man among several staff members, Marco, had walked her past. She had not registered him particularly. She would not have had reason to. How long? Dante said. We think 14 months, Marco said. Maybe longer. The Ravello payments go back at least that far through the account we found. 14 months, yes. Dante picked up the photograph. He looked at Luca Ferrante's face, the ordinary, unremarkable face of a man he had trusted with information that had reached his enemy and nearly gotten his sons taken, and set it back down. Where is he now? Dante said. Guest quarters, East Building. He arrived yesterday for the security rotation. We held the rotation, so he wouldn't know we were looking. Does he know we know? No. Dante stood up from behind the desk. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Marco. Don't tell Alara yet, he said. Marco said nothing. I need an hour, Dante said. Then you can tell her whatever she needs to know. She asked for the full picture, Marco said. No more managing. I know what she asked for. He moved toward the door. 1 hour Marco. He walked to the east building alone. The estate grounds were quiet in the early morning dew on the gravel, birds in the stone pines. The particular Italian autumn light that came in low and golden and made everything look more permanent than it was. Dante walked through it without registering any of it. He knocked on the door of the guest quarters. Luca Ferrante opened it in a t-shirt and jeans, clearly just woken up, hair still pressed flat on one side. He took one look at Dante's face, and the remaining sleep left his expression immediately. He stepped back. Dante came in. He didn't close the door behind him, he left it open, which was its own kind of statement, and Luca understood this because Luca was smart, which was part of why this hurt the way it did. "Sit down," Dante said. Luca sat on the edge of the bed. Dante stood in the middle of the room. "Tell me why," Dante said. Luca opened his mouth. "Not a story," Dante said. "Not a version." "Why?" Luca closed his mouth. He looked at the floor. His hands were on his knees, and he pressed them flat, the way people press things down when they're trying to keep themselves from moving. "They had something on me," he said. "What?" "My brother." He looked up. "Nico. He borrowed money from Ravello 3 years ago. I didn't know until they came to me. They said either I work for them or Nico doesn't make it to his next birthday." Dante looked at him. "You should have come to me," Dante said. "I know. I would have handled Nico's debt. I know that, too." Luca's voice was flat. Not defensive, just exhausted. But I was scared, and I made a choice that was wrong, and then I was in it. There was no clean way out. "So you gave them the location of my children. I gave them monitoring data. Movement patterns. I didn't know what they were going to do with. You knew exactly what they were going to do with it." Dante's voice didn't rise. It just tightened, the way a rope tightens before it breaks something. "You knew what Ravello does with leverage. You've been in this organization long enough to know. Don't tell me you didn't know." Luca looked at him. He didn't say anything else. Dante looked at the man sitting on the bed 12 years, the son of a man his father had known. A face he had seen at 100 meetings and a dozen dinners and the edges of a dozen difficult operations, and felt something harden in him into a form he didn't entirely want to examine. "You're going to give Marco everything," Dante said. "Every contact, every communication, every piece of information you passed." "All of it," yes, Luca said. "And then you're going to disappear," Dante said. "Not because I'm sending you somewhere. Because you're going to understand that what happens to people who compromise my family is significantly worse than whatever Ravello threatened Nico with, and you're going to make yourself very, very difficult to find." Luca was very still. "Your brother's debt is cleared," Dante said. "That's the last thing I do for you. After today, I don't know you." He turned and walked back out through the open door. He told Alara at 8:30. She was in the kitchen with the boys, who were eating breakfast and arguing about something involving a stick Elias had found in the garden that Roman maintained was not interesting. Dante stood in the kitchen doorway and caught Alara's eye, and she read his face the way she had apparently never stopped being able to read his face, because she stood up immediately and told the boys she'd be back in 5 minutes. She followed him into the hall. "The source," she said. Before he could start, "Luca Ferrante. You met him briefly when you arrived." "The quiet one. Brown jacket." "Yes." She processed this for a moment. "Coerced or voluntary?" "Coerced initially. His brother had a debt with Ravello. But it went on long enough that the line between coerced and complicit gets complicated. Is he still on the property?" "He's being debriefed by Marco." "He leaves today," she looked at him. "What does that mean?" "He leaves?" "It means he's gone." "Dante, he's not dead, Alara." "He's gone. There's a difference." She held his gaze for a moment. "And Ravello," she said. "Now that we've identified and removed the source, do they know we know?" "Not yet. They will soon. When Luca stops reporting in, they'll understand something changed. Which means we have a window. A short one." She crossed her arms. "What do you do with a short window?" "Normally I'd use it offensively," he said. "Go at Ravello before they can regroup."
"But with you and the boys here..."
"Don't use us as a reason to be passive," she said. He looked at her. "I mean it," she said. "Don't let having us here make you hesitate in ways that ultimately make us less safe. If the right move is offensive, then make it. It's not that simple." "I'm not saying it's simple. I'm saying don't factor me into the tactical calculation in ways that compromise the outcome." She paused. "I didn't survive 5 years alone by needing someone to be careful on my behalf." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll talk to Marco," he said. "Good," she said. and she went back to the kitchen and her sons and the argument about the stick. The next 4 days were quiet on the surface and entirely not quiet underneath. Marco worked through Luca's debriefing with the thoroughness that was his primary professional quality, and what came back was detailed and bad, and confirmed things Dante had half suspected for longer than he wanted to admit. Ravello had more intelligence on Moretti operations than anyone had realized. The 14 months of Luca's cooperation had been enough time to map significant portions of Dante's logistics, contacts, and financial structure. Dante sat with this information for a full night before he told Alara. He told her in the morning. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "So the problem is bigger than Luca." "Yes, it's structural in some ways." She looked at him. "You're going to have to restructure." "Yes." "And that takes time." "Yes." "How much time do we have before Ravello decides the window is closing and makes a move?" Marco thinks 2 weeks, maybe less. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside the garden was gray-lit. Autumn had shifted in the last day, the golden light replaced by a flat, pressured sky that felt like it was thinking about rain. "The boys can't stay cooped up in here," she said. "They've been inside for 4 days. Phyllis is starting to climb the walls literally. He tried to climb the bookshelf in the library this morning, and Roman is going silent in the way he goes silent when he's processing too much and doesn't have an outlet." "I know, I noticed." "You noticed Roman going silent?" "He sat with me in the study yesterday for an hour and didn't say anything. He just drew in that notebook he carries. I didn't push it." She turned from the window and looked at him. This piece of information sat in her chest in a place she hadn't cleared space for. "He does that when he's thinking," she said. "I figured." "What did he draw?" "I didn't look. It seemed like it would be intrusive." She looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said. "We need to think about schooling. We need to think about routine. If we're going to be here 2 weeks or more, they need structure. I can arrange tutors. I'm sure you can. But let me talk to them first about what they want. They're not luggage, I know that. Sometimes you talk about arrangements for them as if they're a logistics problem." "That's not." He stopped. He looked at her steadily. "You're right. I'll let you lead on that." She nodded. She moved toward the door. "Alara." She stopped. "I want to take them to the garden today," he said. "Just the garden. There's a section in the south corner with a stone wall that's safe and not visible from any exterior approach. Marco's already assessed it. I thought maybe after lunch." She looked at him. "Ask them," she said. "Not me. Ask them if they want to." He nodded. She left. Roman said yes with the reservations he attached to most things. Elias said yes before Dante had finished the sentence. They went after lunch, the 3 of them, and Alara watched from the library window. She told herself she was working. And she did have the laptop open, but she was watching as Dante walked the boys through the south corner of the garden, with Elias immediately finding every rock and stick an interesting corner, and Roman walking beside Dante with his hands in his pockets, not yet ready to let himself run. At some point, Roman said something, and Dante crouched down to hear it and then said something back, and Roman's hands came out of his pockets. She looked back at the laptop. She thought, "Stop watching. You're watching too much. You're looking for evidence of who he is, and you're going to find it, whether it's there or not, because you want to find it, because it's easier to have evidence than to sit with the not knowing." She closed the laptop. She went downstairs and made coffee and stood at the kitchen counter with it and deliberately did not look out the window. She was still standing there when Marco came in. His face told her before he said anything. "What happened?" she said. It was not a question. "Ravello moved faster than we projected," he said. "There's a team outside the estate perimeter. 6 men, confirmed by surveillance. They've been in position for approximately 3 hours. They moved in during the night while we were processing Luca's debrief." She set her coffee cup down. "The boys are in the garden," she said. "I know. He stopped. She was already moving. She came through the garden door at a pace that was not quite running. She was holding herself just below running, the way you do when you don't want to communicate panic to children and also cannot actually slow down. And Dante saw her coming and stood up from the crouch he'd been in beside Elias and read her face from 30 feet away. He said something to the boys that she couldn't hear. Then he walked toward her, intersecting her path before she reached them. "They're outside the wall," she said. "I know. Marco just called me." He was completely still. The garden stillness. She had forgotten he could do that, contain urgency so completely that his body gave nothing away. We're not in immediate danger. They're not at the perimeter yet. The extraction window is intact. Don't extraction window me right now, she said. Her voice was low and tight. I need to know what is actually happening. Ravello has 6 men outside. They haven't breached the outer perimeter. Marco has our team repositioning. We have time to move the boys inside and get to the secondary location before this becomes a direct confrontation. And is that what you want to do? Run to the secondary location? His jaw shifted. It's the safest option for the boys. Is it what you want to do? He looked at her for a moment. No. Then don't do it on my account, she said. Handle this. End it. Because I am not going to spend the next 5 years moving from one secondary location to another every time Ravello decides to pressure you. He looked at her for a moment that was longer than it needed to be, and in it she could see him recalibrating the same recalibration she'd watched before, but deeper this time, something shifting in his assessment of her. Get the boys inside, he said. Stay with Marco in the interior room, he knows which one. Don't open any exterior-facing windows. All right. This will be over by tonight. Don't promise things you're not sure of, she said. He looked at her. Get the boys, he said. She turned back to where Roman and Elias were standing and watching them with the particular attention of children who understand that something is happening and are deciding how scared to be. She walked to them. We're going inside, she said. We're going to play cards in the room with the green chairs. Marco is going to come with us. Why? Roman said. Because there's a situation happening outside that your father is handling, and we're going to stay out of the way so he can handle it. Roman looked past her toward Dante. Is it the bad people, he said? Yes. Roman looked at Dante for a moment. Then he looked at his mother. It's okay, he said. Elias took her hand. They went inside. The next 4 hours were the longest of Alara's adult life, in a category she hadn't previously occupied, not the grief long or the alone long that she knew, but the waiting while something is happening long, which has its own particular texture. It sits differently in the body. It makes the hands want to do things and gives them nothing to do. Marco stayed with them. He had a phone in his hand and checked it at intervals. She counted roughly every 6 minutes, with an expression that told her things were developing, but not which direction. She played cards with the boys. Roman beat her twice at a game that required actual concentration. She was not performing inattention, she was genuinely distracted, and Roman won fairly, and knew she was distracted and chose not to comment on it, which was so much his father's quality that she had to look away for a moment. Elias fell asleep at tea at 4 in the afternoon, which was not unusual for him. He had the ability to sleep through tension that Roman completely lacked. Roman sat across from his mother in the green-chaired room and said, quietly so as not to wake Elias, is he going to be okay? Your father? Yes, she looked at her son. Yes, she said. He knows what he's doing. Roman was quiet for a moment. He looked at his cards. He crouched down to talk to me today. In the garden. Nobody does that. He's a tall man, she said. Adults don't usually bother. He arranged and rearranged a card in his hand. He asked what I was thinking about. I told him I was thinking about whether it was worth trusting someone who wasn't there for a long time. Her breath stopped. What did he say? She asked. He said it depended on the reason they weren't there, and on whether they stayed now that they were. Roman looked up. Then he said that even if I decided it wasn't worth it, he'd understand. That I didn't owe him anything. She said nothing. I thought that was a strange thing to say, Roman said. Why? Because most people who want you to trust them don't tell you that you don't have to. She looked at her son for a long moment. No, she said. They don't. Marco's phone buzzed at 6:17. He looked at it, and something in his face released not dramatically, just a small degree of tension, leaving around the jaw and the eyes. It's handled, he said. Alara breathed out. Roman looked at Marco. Handled means it's over? It means the situation outside is resolved, yes. And my father is fine, Marco said. He'll be in shortly. Elias stirred on the settee and then sat up with the instant wakefulness he had, looking around the room to reassemble where he was and what was happening. Did I miss it? He said. There was nothing to see, Roman told him. Something happened, though. Something happened and it's over, Roman said with the authority of someone who had been awake for the whole thing. Elias looked at his mother. She nodded. Okay, Elias said, and lay back down. Dante came in at 6:45. He had a cut across the back of his left hand that had been dealt with, wrapped tightly, not serious, and he was carrying his jacket over one arm because there was a tear in the sleeve she didn't want to examine too closely. He looked at both boys first, then at Alara. She looked at the hand. "It's nothing," he said. "I'll decide that." Alara. "Sit down," she said. "Let me see it." He sat. She unwrapped the temporary dressing Marco's team had applied and looked at the cut and redressed it with the kit Marco produced from somewhere. And she did this with the specific focused attention of someone who is doing a task precisely because it's better than the alternative, which is acknowledging the enormity of what the task represents. Dante sat still. The boys watched from across the room. "It needs a proper dressing," she said. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he said. She sat back. "Is it over?" she said. Ravello. "Is this their operation here is finished?" he said. "The men outside will not be coming back." He paused. "The leadership is a different conversation. That takes longer." "How much longer?" "Weeks, possibly months. But the immediate threat to this house is gone." She held his gaze. "I want to talk about long-term," she said. "Tomorrow, when the boys are occupied. I want to have the conversation we said we'd have about the organization, about what comes after." "Yes," he said, "tomorrow." She stood up. Elias had come across the room and was examining the dressing on Dante's hand with the scientific interest he applied to most things. "Does it hurt?" Elias asked. Dante said, "How much is a little?" "On a scale of 10, about a 3. Elias considered this. "I had a splinter last month that was a 7, he said seriously. "Splinters are worse than they look," Dante said. "That's what I said." Elias looked at his mother. "I said exactly that. Didn't I?" "You said exactly that," she confirmed. Roman had come across more slowly. He stopped at the edge of what felt like the right distance and stood there. Dante looked at him. "I'm okay," Dante said. Roman nodded once. He didn't say anything. He went back to the table and picked up his card hand from where he'd left it. "Are we finishing this game?" he said. "Yes," Alara said. She sat back down across from her son. Dante stayed where he was. Elias climbed up next to him and looked at Roman's cards from across the room, which Roman objected to immediately. And the room came back to itself, slowly, unevenly, the way rooms do after something has moved through them. It was Marco who brought the news. 2 days later, 9 in the morning. He came to Dante's study and he came to Alara separately because he had clearly made a decision that she should hear this at the same time and not through Dante's filter. And she had come to trust this particular quality of Marco's enough that when he appeared at her door, she felt the cold before he said a word. She came down to the study. Dante was already there. He was standing at the window, and he turned when she came in, and his face was the face he made when he was working extremely hard to show nothing and almost succeeding. Marco closed the door. He stood in the center of the room between them. "The Ravello leadership has made contact," he said. "Through an intermediary. They're proposing a meeting." Dante said no. "There's a condition attached to the proposal," Marco said. He looked at Alara. The cold intensified. "They're asking for the meeting to include Alara," Marco said. She felt Dante go completely still on the other side of the room without looking at him. "They know she has no formal standing in your organization," Marco continued. "That's deliberate. They're framing it as a civilian conversation." They're saying paused. "They're saying they have information that directly affects her and the boys. Information they claim only she can evaluate. They're insisting the meeting happens with her present, or it doesn't happen at all." The room was entirely quiet. Alara looked at Dante. His face was a controlled mask over something that was clearly not controlled at all. "No," he said again. "I haven't said yes or no yet," Alara said. "I'm saying no," Dante said. "It's not your call," she said. "It absolutely is my call. You are not sitting across a table from Ravello leadership. They said they have information that affects my boys. They're using it as leverage to—" "I know what they're doing," she said. "I understand the mechanism. They want me in the room because having me in the room destabilizes you and gives them an advantage." She looked at him steadily. "But if there's something they know about my sons that I don't, I need to know what it is." "Alara, what could they know that I need to worry about?" she asked Marco. Marco hesitated. "Tell her," Dante said. The words came out flat and resigned, which told her more than the words did. Marco looked at her. "Before you arrived in Cascais," Marco said, "and before Dante located you in the early years, when you were still moving, there's a period of approximately 8 months that we can't fully account for. You were in northern Portugal, we think, but the documentation trail is thin. He paused. Ravello has indicated they have surveillance from that period. They haven't specified what, only that it concerns the boys. Alara looked at him, the 8 months. She knew the 8 months. The boys had been 18 months old. She had been living in a rented room in a small town north of Porto. She had been running low on money and had taken work where she could find it, and some of it had been translating for people whose purposes she had not examined too closely because they had two toddlers and not enough income, and the luxury of ethical auditing was one she couldn't afford that year. She had never told Dante. She had never told anyone. She looked at Marco. Set up the meeting, she said. Alara, Dante said. I said set up the meeting, she looked at Dante. Her voice was completely level, and she knew he could hear the thing underneath it, and she couldn't help that. I'll go. You'll come with me, and we'll hear what they have to say. Dante looked at her. She could see him trying to read her, trying to find the shape of whatever she wasn't saying, and she held his gaze and kept her face as neutral as she could, which was not neutral enough, and she knew it. What aren't you telling me? He said quietly. We'll talk, she said. Tonight, before the meeting. Tonight, she said. And she turned and walked out of the study and up the stairs and into her room and closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed with her hands pressed flat on her knees. She thought 8 months. 1 bad year. You did what you had to do for the boys, and you didn't ask questions, and you told yourself it was over and buried. She thought Ravello dug it up. She pressed her hands harder against her knees and breathed. Whatever they had found from those 8 months, whatever surveillance, whatever documentation it was going to come into this house and into this life she was trying to build with a man who was already operating on the extreme outer edge of his capacity to trust, and when it came, it would reframe everything she had told him and everything she had asked him to believe about who she was. She thought, you have to tell him first, before they do. Because if he hears it from them, you lose the only version of this that you have any control over. She looked at the door. She thought, tonight. And underneath all of it, under the fear and the calculation and the dread of what was coming, was one smaller and more unbearable thought, the thing she had never looked at directly in 5 years, because looking at it directly would have made it real in a way she could not survive alone. The men she had translated for in the bad year in the northern town. She had not known their names. She had not wanted to know. But she had known, in the way you know things you're not looking at, that the documents she was moving between languages were not ordinary business documents. And the men who commissioned the work, the men whose intermediary had appeared at her door one rainy afternoon with a cash pamphlet and a stack of papers in the specific manner of someone who was accustomed to people not asking questions. Those men had known where she was. They had known what she was. They had known she was Moretti's woman. And they had said nothing. They had simply paid her and returned for more translation work and paid her again. And eventually she had moved on and found other work and told herself it was over. But they had known. And there was only one organization operating in northern Portugal in that period with the resources to have known who she was and chosen not to use it. Only one organization that would have found value in keeping her operational, unaware, and in debt to them without her knowledge. Ravello. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She thought, they didn't find you in the bad year. They found you before Dante did, and they let you run because you were more useful running. And now they have 5 years of leverage and a meeting request, and you walked into their house without knowing it. She breathed. She breathed again. She looked at the door of her room and thought about Dante on the other side of it, the man who had spent 5 years searching for her, who was sitting in his study right now, trying to read a situation he didn't have the full picture of, who had already asked her what she wasn't telling him. She stood up. She needed to get to him before her courage decided it had somewhere better to be. She found him in the study. He was standing at the window where she had left him, still holding his jacket, still watching something in the middle distance that was not the garden. Marco was gone. The room was quiet in the specific way. Rooms get quiet after bad information has moved through them and settled into the walls. She closed the door behind her. He turned, she said, "Sit down. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you say anything." He looked at her face. He sat down. She stood in the middle of the room. She didn't pace. She had learned a long time ago that pacing while delivering difficult information made the listener focus on the movement instead of the words, and she needed him to focus on the words. When the boys were 18 months old, she said, I was in a town north of Porto called Viana do Castelo. I had been there 6 weeks. I was running low on money, and I had taken translation work through an intermediary, a man who knocked on my door with cash and documents, and the manner of someone who expected no questions. Dante was still. The documents were legal on their surface, she said. Contracts, correspondence, some financial paperwork. The language was ordinary enough that I could tell myself I was doing ordinary work. I did that telling for about 3 months, she paused. By month 4, I understood that the organizations generating the documents were not ordinary. By month 5, I understood they were criminal. I kept working because I had 2 toddlers in the rent, and because the intermediary had the specific quality of someone whose goodbye was more dangerous than his hello. Dante's hands were flat on the desk. I stopped in month 8, she said. I moved. I found other work. I did not look back at what I had translated or who had commissioned it, because looking back felt like a door I couldn't afford to open. She met his eyes. I understand now that the intermediary worked for Ravello. I understand that they knew who I was the entire time. I understand that they allowed me to continue operating, because I was more useful to them as an unaware asset than as a hostage. She took a breath, which means they have 8 months of documentation connecting me to their operations. Documents with my translation signature. Correspondence I handled. Work product that, taken out of context, looks like knowing cooperation. The room was absolutely silent. I am telling you this, she said, because they are going to use it at this meeting to make me look like something I'm not, and I needed you to hear it from me first. She stopped. She waited. Dante looked at the desk in front of him for a long time. His jaw was working slightly. She could see the muscle in it moving. Then he said, "Why didn't you stop after month 1? I told you, money. There are other ways to. Not with 2 toddlers in a foreign country under a false name," she said. "You don't know what that year looked like. You weren't there." The words landed. She felt them land in the room and felt him feel them and didn't take them back because they were true. He looked up. "No," he said, "I wasn't. I'm not saying it to hurt you," she said. "I'm saying it because the judgment you're working up right now is coming from a position of someone who had resources and infrastructure, and Marco and 20 people who would take a bullet for him. I had 18-month-old twins and 18,000 euros and a rented room." He was quiet for a moment. "Did you know the work was criminal when you took it?" "I suspected. I didn't confirm." "When you confirmed..." I stopped. He looked at her. 8 months is a long time," he said. Not accusatory, just looking at the reality of it. "I know that. Ravello will have built a case with it. What they bring to that table will be structured to look..." "I know what it will look like," she said. "That's why I'm telling you now. So when they lay it out, you're not hearing it for the first time." He stood up. He moved around the desk and walked to the window and stood with his back to her for a moment, and she watched the shape of his shoulders and thought, this is the moment. This is where he decides what 5 years of searching actually meant. Whether it meant her, specifically, or whether it meant a version of her that he'd constructed in his absence, cleaner and simpler than the real one. He turned around. "I'm not angry at you," he said. She looked at him. "I want to be clear about that," he said. "What you did to survive, I understand what that looks like. I've made enough of those choices myself." He came back to the desk and stood on the near side of it, closer to her. "What I'm angry about is that they had access to you for 8 months and I didn't know you were alive." She looked at him. Something shifted in her chest. It moved like something heavy that had been fixed in one position for a long time. "The meeting," she said, "I'm still going. I know. They asked for me specifically, and if I don't come, they use the documentation without giving me a chance to..." "I know," he said. "You're going. We're going together." He held her gaze. "But I need you to understand what you're walking into. This is not a negotiation. This is Ravello trying to own you. If they can establish that you knowingly assisted their operations, even with documents you handled in desperation, even with a thin thread of evidence, they have leverage over you that is separate from your connection to me. That's what they want. That's the play. I understand the play." "Then you understand that we go in there and we give them nothing," he said. "Not fear, not acknowledgement, not the version of you that apologizes for surviving." She looked at him. "Can you do that?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Can you?" He looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said. The meeting was set for the following evening. A neutral location Marco's team selected swept a private dining room above a restaurant in central Rome, accessible from two directions, with Dante's people positioned at every exit, and Ravello aware of this and having agreed to it, which told Dante something about how confident they were in what they were bringing. Alara spent the morning with the boys. She had not told them anything about the meeting. She had told them she and Dante had a business dinner. Roman had looked at her with the expression he made when he was feisling something as probably not the full story. And Elias had asked what was for their dinner, which was both deeply practical and exactly what she needed. She made lunch. She sat with them in the garden in the weak autumn sun and listened to Roman explain something that had been bothering him about the card game's internal logic, and she held Elias against her side while he ate an apple and talked about the cat that had appeared again near the garden wall. She thought, whatever happens tonight, they don't inherit this. I don't care what it costs. They don't inherit it. She kissed both their heads when Marco came to get her. Roman held on a half-second longer than usual. She didn't say anything. She went. Dante was in the car already. He looked at her when she got in and said nothing. She looked back and said nothing. The car moved out of the estate and into the Roman evening. Marco sat in the front. Two additional vehicles moved behind them, invisible to anyone who didn't know to look. Alara looked out the window at the city. She had lived in Rome for 3 years with Dante and knew it with the specific intimacy of someone who has walked a place at all hours and in all weathers. She had not seen it in 5 years, and it looked the same in the way cities look the same, the bones unchanged, the details shifted, and she felt the old familiarity of it rise in her like something she had not expected to still be there. Are you all right? Dante said, quietly. Not for Marco. Ask me in 2 hours, she said. He nodded. They didn't speak again. The Ravello representative was named Caruso. He was 61, compact, with the silver-haired stillness of a man who had survived enough things that almost nothing could manufacture surprise in him anymore. He stood when they entered, which was formal, and gestured to the chairs across from him, which was deliberate, and had 2 men positioned at the rear wall, which was a reminder. Dante's jaw was set. He pulled Alara's chair before she could pull it herself. She registered this as automatic ingrained, not performed, and sat beside her. Caruso looked at them both. Mr. Moretti, he said. Ms. Voss, Carver, Alara said, forgive me. Carver, a small pause that acknowledged he didn't actually consider it a correction worth making. Thank you for coming. You made it difficult to decline, Dante said. Yes, Caruso said. That was intentional. He folded his hands on the table. I'm going to be direct because I think we all prefer directness. The conflict between Ravello and Moretti is expensive. It has been expensive for 12 years. The men we lost outside your estate last week were men with families, Mr. Moretti, and I imagine you have similar math on your side. Get to the point, Dante said. The point is that we would like to stop, Caruso said. We're prepared to propose a formal cessation of hostilities, division of territory along lines that reflect current operational reality, and a mutual non-aggression arrangement with teeth on both sides. Dante was quiet. Alara looked at Caruso and waited. In exchange for this generous proposal, Dante said, You want what, exactly? Caruso turned his eyes to Alara. A conversation, he said. A specific acknowledgement. He reached beside his chair and placed a slim folder on the table between them. Ms. Carver participated in Ravello operations for 8 months. This is documented thoroughly. We are not interested in using that documentation against her. We have no interest in the legal exposure it would create for anyone involved. What we are interested in is, what you're interested in, Dante said, is using it as permanent leverage over the mother of my children. I would use the word insurance, Caruso said pleasantly. You'd use whatever word is most comfortable, Dante said. Dante, Alara said. He stopped. She looked at Caruso. What specific acknowledgement, she said. Caruso opened the folder. He turned several pages toward her copies of documents she recognized, translations she had made, correspondence she had handled in a rented room in a northern Portuguese town when her boys were 18 months old. Looking at them was like looking at a scar from the inside. We need a statement, Caruso said. From you, acknowledging that the work was performed with full knowledge of the organizational context. He paused. It would never be made public. It exists solely as a document in our records. Should the Moretti organization ever act against Ravello interests in specific ways we would enumerate clearly, it would be released to relevant Italian law enforcement. Alara looked at the documents. That statement would be false, she said. That's between you and your recollection, Caruso said. I didn't have full knowledge of the organizational context. You had sufficient knowledge by month 4, according to your own cessation of work in month 8. One generally doesn't stop doing something innocent. The table was very quiet. Alara looked at the documents. She looked at the careful construction of it, the way Caruso had laid it out. The clinical precision of a man who had done this kind of work for a long time and understood that the architecture of coercion required structural integrity. She thought, he's right that it holds, the documentation holds. A statement confirming what the documentation implies would give them a lock on my life indefinitely. She thought, and the alternative is, she looked at Dante. He was looking at Caruso. His face was the mask, complete. Not a thread of what was underneath it visible. What's the alternative? Dante said. If she doesn't sign. Then we don't have a peace agreement, Caruso said simply. And the documentation finds its own way into appropriate channels. Miss Carver would face scrutiny she may find difficult to survive professionally and personally, and he paused. And the children's paternity, now established and documentable, becomes a matter of significant organizational interest. The temperature in the room dropped. Alara felt Dante go completely still beside her. Clarify that, Dante said. His voice was the quiet that precedes very loud things. The boys are Moretti heirs, Caruso said. In the absence of a peaceful arrangement, they become relevant to the succession question. Should anything happen to you, Mr. Moretti, we would want to be involved in ensuring there might... Stop talking, Dante said. Caruso stopped. The 2 men at the rear wall had shifted their weight. Marco, standing behind Dante's left shoulder, had become very still. Dante looked at Caruso. You just threatened my children, he said. I described a structural reality. You threatened my children. Still quiet. In front of their mother. At a table I sat at in good faith. He leaned forward very slightly. I want you to think very carefully about what happens next. Mr. Moretti, I came here because you said you wanted peace, Dante said. I sat across from you because there are men dead on both sides, and you're right that it's expensive, and I have people I want to protect. I was prepared to listen to a real proposal. The quiet was absolute now, the kind that fills a room from the bottom up. What you brought instead is a threat against a woman who did nothing to you and children who are 5 years old. So I want you to think, very carefully, about what you believe happens next. Caruso looked at him. Something in Caruso's stillness had changed quality. The pleasant control of a man conducting familiar business had shifted into something more careful. Alara put her hand flat on the table. Both men looked at her. I'm not signing anything, she said. Her voice was level. Not because I'm not afraid of the documentation I am. I'll be honest about that. But because signing a false statement hands you a permanent mechanism to control both of us, and no temporary peace is worth that. She closed the folder. If you want a real agreement with Moretti, you bring a real proposal. Without my name on it. Without my children in it. She pushed the folder back across the table. This isn't one. Caruso looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Dante. He seemed to search for the right word. Your family is formidable, Mr. Moretti. Yes, Dante said. They are. Caruso leaned back. I'll need to consult with my principals, he said. You do that, Dante said. And when you come back, if you come back with something that doesn't start with a threat. They stood. Alara stood with them. They walked out. The cold air outside the restaurant hit her like a hand. She walked 3 steps onto the pavement and stopped and put both hands on her knees and breathed, not because she was going to be sick, but because her body needed a moment to process the fact that it was over and she was standing outside, and the folder was still on the table behind them. Dante's hand came to her back, flat, steady. You're all right, he said. I know, she said. Give me a second. She breathed. She straightened up. They'll come back, she said. Probably. With something real or with something worse. I don't know yet. He looked at the street. Marco was already on the phone 3 steps away, pulling in the outer perimeter. But what you said in there, I meant it. I know you meant it. He turned to look at her. I want you to know that I would have found another way. If you had signed, if you had decided in that room that it was the only option, I would have found a way to neutralize the document afterward. You didn't have to, I know, she said. I didn't do it for you. He looked at her. I did it because I'm not giving anyone a mechanism to control my life, she said. Not Ravello, not anyone, a pause, including you. He held her gaze. Including me, he said yes. The car came. Marco opened the door. They got in. Back at the estate, the boys were asleep. Alara checked on them in sequence Roman first, flat on his back with his arms at his sides, which was how he slept, neat and deliberate, even unconscious. Then Elias, twisted into a shape that looked uncomfortable and clearly wasn't. She stood in the doorway of each room for a moment. She went back downstairs. Dante was in the kitchen. He had made coffee, which surprised her because she had never seen him make coffee before. There had always been someone to make it. He was standing at the counter with 2 cups, looking at them as if he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with them now. She came in. She took one of the cups. They stood at the counter and drank coffee and didn't talk, which was its own kind of thing, the specific not talking of 2 people who have been through something together and don't yet have the words for it, and are not uncomfortable with the absence. After a while, she said the documentation. Marco's already working on it, he said. We'll counter-document. Context timeline evidence of coercion. It won't make it disappear, but it will make their version considerably less clean. How long? Weeks. It's detailed work, she nodded. And Ravello, Caruso will report back to his principals. My read is that they were testing the limits. They found them. Whether that produces a real proposal or an escalation depends on what the principals decide. Turn to look at her. If it escalates, I need you to be prepared to move again. I know. Somewhere farther this time. Outside Europe, possibly. She looked at her coffee. If it comes to that, she said, I go on my terms. I pick the location. I pick the terms. Yes, and we talk about schooling and routine before we land, not after. Yes. She turned the cup in her hands. Elias asked me tonight if you were going to live with us, she said. Dante was very still. What did you tell him? I told him we were still figuring it out. What did he say? He said figuring it out was fine as long as it didn't take forever, because forever is too long to wait for things. She almost smiled. He's 5. He's right, Dante said quietly. She looked at him. He looked back. The kitchen was quiet and the estate was quiet, and outside the Italian night had settled into something cold and clear. The first genuinely cold night of autumn. And the silence between them was the kind that had shifted quality, no longer the silence of 2 people managing distance, but something closer to the silence of 2 people standing in the same place. I'm not there yet, she said. I want you to know that. What happened tonight doesn't change things between us overnight. I'm not there. I know. But she stopped. She looked for the honest word. I'm not where I was when you walked into my apartment in Cascais. He didn't move. He didn't press it. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. She set her coffee cup in the sink and went upstairs. She did not look back to see if he was watching. She didn't need to. Caruso called Marco at 7 the following morning. Marco came to the study at 7:15 and stood across the desk from Dante with the phone in his hand and his face doing the thing it did when the news was bad, but contained rather than catastrophic. They're not coming back with a real proposal, Marco said. Dante looked at him. Caruso's principals rejected the peace framework entirely, Marco said. Their position is that last night confirmed Moretti is weakened by the family situation. They're reading Alara's presence and your reaction to the threat against the boys as exposure. They're reading it as a vulnerability, Dante said. Yes, he sat back in the chair. They're moving to a timeline, Marco said. We don't have the exact detail, but the intercepts from this morning put them in active planning. They want to act before you can restructure the organization. How long do we have? Marco looked at him. 72 hours, he said. Maybe less. Dante put both hands flat on the desk. He thought about the boys asleep upstairs. He thought about Alara standing in the kitchen the night before with a coffee cup in her hands and the specific not talking that had felt more intimate than most conversations he could remember. He thought about Roman's hands coming out of his pockets in the garden. He thought about Elias saying forever is too long to wait for things. He thought, you spent 12 years building something that is now the reason the people you love are not safe. He thought Caruso read Alara as exposure. He was wrong. But the organization is real exposure. As long as you run it, they can use it against her. Marco, he said. Yes, sit down. Marco sat. I want to talk about what comes after, Dante said. Not after the immediate threat. After the full restructure. The exit. Marco looked at him. You've been thinking about this for a while, Marco said. It was not a question. 3 years, Dante said. Marco was quiet for a moment. I know the timing is bad, Dante said. I know we have 72 hours and restructuring takes months, and I can't do both simultaneously without leaving windows that Ravello can walk through. He looked at Marco steadily. But I need you to understand that this conversation is happening, regardless of what the next 72 hours look like. Because when this is over, however it ends, I'm not coming out the other side. I'm not running the same organizations in the same way. Marco held his gaze. All right, Marco said. But first, Dante said, we deal with Ravello. How? Dante thought about Alara in that dining room, pushing the folder back across the table. He thought about what she had said, not Ravello, not anyone, including you. He thought about the thing he had been refusing to do for 3 years, because doing it felt like surrender, and about how he had recently come to understand that the things that feel like surrender and the things that are actually surrender are not always the same. I'm going to call someone, Dante said. Marco waited. There's a prosecutor in Rome, Dante said, a woman named Ferraro. She's been building a case against Ravello for 4 years. She has everything except the operational intelligence to close the loop. He looked at Marco. I have the operational intelligence. The room was completely still. You're talking about cooperating with the prosecution, Marco said. I'm talking about providing intelligence, Dante said. On Ravello specifically. On their structure, their finances, their territorial operations. In exchange for what? Dante looked at him. In exchange for a conversation about the future, he said. For me and for the organization. Not immunity, I'm not going to insult Ferraro with that. But a conversation, he paused. She has wanted Ravello for 4 years, Marco. I can give her Ravello. Marco was very still. This ends us, Marco said quietly. This version of us. The organization as it stands. I know. You understand what you're proposing. I've understood it for 3 years, Dante said. I just didn't have a reason that was worth the cost. He looked at his desk. I have 2 reasons now. They're 5 years old and they have my eyes. Marco sat across from him for a long moment. Then he said, you'll need to tell Alara before you make the call. Yes. She'll want to know what it means for the organization. What it means for the people in it. Yes. And she may not. Marco Dante looked at him directly. I know, I'm going to tell her. And whatever she says, I'm making the call. He paused. But I want her to know first. Marco stood. She's in the library, he said. She's been up since 6. Dante stood. He moved toward the door and stopped with his hand on the frame. The 72 hours, he said. I'll keep monitoring, Marco said. The moment the picture changes, you'll know. Dante nodded. He went down the hall toward the library. Outside the estate windows, the Italian morning was gray and cold, and the garden was still and bare, and somewhere in the east wing, he could hear the sound of the boys beginning to wake up a door, footsteps, Roman's voice asking something and Elias responding with something louder, and the ordinary sound of it moved through him like something he had no word for. The particular feeling of understanding for the first time what he stood to lose in choosing, with complete clarity and no hesitation, what he was going to do about it. He pushed open the library door. Alara looked up from the table where she was working. She looked at his face. She closed the laptop. Tell me, she said. He came in and sat across from her and told her everything the call he was going to make, the prosecutor, the intelligence he was prepared to hand over, what it would mean for the organization and for the people in it, and for the life he had built over 20 years of choices that had led, without his understanding it at the time, directly to this room and this woman and this morning. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This destroys everything you built." Most of it, he said, "Yes." "And you're doing it?" "Yes." She looked at him. "Why now?" she said. "Not I understand the immediate reason." "I mean, why now and not 3 years ago when you said you started thinking about it?" He looked at her steadily. Because 3 years ago, he said, "I still thought power was the thing that kept people safe. That the organization was the protection." He paused. "And then I found you. And I watched you from a car for a week and saw what you built without it. And I understood that I had been wrong about which direction safety ran." She looked at him for a long time. The library was very quiet. Then Roman appeared in the doorway in his pajamas with his hair still pressed flat on one side, looking between them with the measuring gaze he had inherited from the man sitting across from his mother. And he said, in the voice of someone who had clearly been listening from the hall for longer than was politely acknowledged, "Is something happening?" Dante looked at the boy. "Yes," he said, "something is happening." But it's the kind that ends better than it started. Roman looked at his mother. She held his gaze. Go get dressed, she said. Both of you. Breakfast in 20 minutes. Roman looked between them once more. Then he turned and went back down the hall, and the sound of him waking his brother came through the walls not gently. Roman never did anything gently, and Elias's protest, and then the sound of both of them, present and loud and entirely real. Dante reached across the table. His hand rested near hers, not on it. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. She looked at his hand. Then she looked at him. Make the call, she said. He nodded. He stood. He was almost at the door when she said his name. He stopped. She was looking at the table, and then she looked up. When this is over, she said. When Ravello is handled and the restructure is done, and whatever prosecutor Ferraro decides to do with you is decided. She paused. I want to have a real conversation about what this is. Between us. An actual conversation, not she stopped. Not managed, not careful. A real one. He looked at her. Yes, he said. She nodded. He went to make the call. And somewhere in the East Wing, Roman was explaining to Elias, with considerable authority, that something was happening and it was going to be fine, and Elias was asking whether fine meant Vicente or Piche, and the answer, apparently, was both, and neither of them knew yet what their father was doing at the other end of the hall, or what it was going to cost him, or what it was going to give them. But the morning was moving forward regardless, and breakfast was in 20 minutes, and outside the estate walls, the city was waking up into what was going to be, one way or another, the last ordinary day before everything. Dante made the call at 8:43 in the morning. He stood at the window of his study with the phone against his ear and listened to it ring twice before a woman's voice answered precise, unhurried, the voice of someone who did not startle easily and did not waste words on surprise. Ferraro, she said. This is Dante Moretti, he said. I think you've been expecting this call for a while. A pause, not long. The kind that means the person on the other end is recalibrating, not hesitating. 4 years, she said. I have information on Ravello, he said. Operational structure, financial routing, territorial maps, and the names of 6 law enforcement contacts they've been paying inside 3 different jurisdictions. He looked out at the gray garden. I want to talk about terms, Mr. Moretti, Ferraro said. You understand that cooperation doesn't mean immunity. I'm not asking for immunity. Another pause. Longer. Then what are you asking for? A conversation, he said. An honest one. About what I can give you and what the parameters look like afterward. For me and for the people in my organization who had no meaningful choice about being in it. You're asking me to consider the people around you. Some of them. Not all. I'll give you the ones who don't deserve consideration along with everything else. She was quiet for a moment. When, she said. Today, he said. This afternoon. I have a 72-hour window before Ravello moves, and I would prefer they move into something that already has walls around it. The line was silent for 3 full seconds. 2 o'clock, Ferraro said. My office. Come alone. I'll bring my lawyer. Of course you will, she said, and hung up. He told Marco first. Marco listened with the stillness he used when he was processing something that required him to restructure multiple internal frameworks simultaneously. When Dante finished, Marco looked at the window for a moment. The organization, Marco said. The people in it. The ones who can be protected. I'm protecting, Dante said. The ones who can't, he paused. They made their choices with full information. I made mine with incomplete information for 20 years, and I'm done using that as an excuse. Marco was quiet. You've been the only person in my life, Dante said, who has consistently told me the truth when I didn't want to hear it. I need you to tell me right now if there's something I'm not seeing. Marco looked at him. There's nothing you're not seeing, Marco said. You're seeing everything clearly. That's what makes it hard. He stood up straighter. I'll secure the estate while you're at the meeting. If Ravello moves during the window full extraction protocol, Dante said, Ilara makes the call, not me, not you, her. Marco nodded once. Go, Marco said. Don't be late for Ferraro. The meeting with Prosecutor Ferraro lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. Dante came back to the estate at 7 in the evening with his lawyer, a quiet, precise man named Aldo, who had represented the Moretti family for 15 years, and who emerged from the meeting with the expression of someone who had watched something unprecedented and was still assembling his feelings about it. Ilara was in the sitting room with the boys when Dante came in. She looked at his face. Go wash up, she told the boys. Dinner in 30 minutes. Roman looked at Dante. You okay? Roman said. The directness of it still caught her, sometimes the way Roman asked the question adults spent years learning to approach sideways. Yes, Dante said. Go wash up. Roman went. Elias followed, pausing to touch Dante's arm as he passed in the wordless way he had, the gesture that required nothing back. Alara waited until she heard them upstairs. Tell me, she said. He sat down. He sat heavily, the way people sit when they've been holding a particular kind of weight for hours and have put it down and feel both lighter and emptier. Ferraro takes the Ravello intelligence, he said. All of it. She moves within 48 hours. She already has the framework. She needed the operational detail to close the loop. Ravello's leadership faces coordinated arrest across 3 jurisdictions simultaneously. He paused. The 72-hour window becomes irrelevant because they'll be managing their own crisis before they can mobilize against us. And you, Alara said. He looked at her. The organization operates under a consent decree, he said. Monitored restructuring over 24 months. I step back from operational control immediately. Marco takes interim leadership with oversight. He stopped. There are financial penalties, significant ones, and I'll be required to provide testimony in the Ravello prosecution, public testimony, not protected. Public, she said. Yes. She understood what that meant. The name, the details, the 20 years of choices laid out in a courtroom for anyone to read. And after the 24 months, she said, the organization in its current form ceases to exist, he said. What emerges from the restructure is legitimate, fully. Property, logistics, some financial services. Marco has been building toward this for 3 years. He's understood before I did where this was going. She looked at him. You talked to Marco about this before me, she said. About the broad strokes 3 years ago, he held her gaze. But the decision to actually do it, I made that this morning. After I talked to you, she was quiet for a moment. The financial penalties, she said. How bad? Bad, he said. The estate is likely going. Some of the other holdings. What remains will be the legitimate operations and enough to... He stopped. Enough to live on, comfortably. Not the way I've been living. She looked around the room, the high ceilings, the stone walls, the weight of 3 generations of wealth and power in every piece of furniture. Good, she said. He looked at her. I mean it, she said. I never wanted this house. I want a house, not this one. She paused. The boys need a garden, not an estate. Something in his face shifted. She saw it and looked away because the look on his face was the kind that required more from her than she was ready to give in this particular moment, and she knew it and was honest enough with herself to acknowledge it. Eat dinner with us tonight, she said. That's what happens next. Dinner, he nodded. Okay, he said. The arrests happened the following morning. Alara learned about them from Marco, who came to her door at 7 with the specific air of a man delivering news he considers unambiguously good. Ferraro moved at 5 a.m., he said. 11 arrests across Rome, Milan, and Palermo. Caruso is in custody. The 2 men from the dining room are in custody. The principals are in custody. He paused. It's done. She stood in the doorway. The documentation, she said. The 8 months. Ferraro's team pulled it as part of the Ravello seizure, Marco said. In context, full context, with the coercion timeline, it supports the case against Ravello, not against you. You're documented as an unknowing asset, not a cooperating one. He held her gaze. It's done, Alara. That particular door is closed. She breathed. It moved through her the way relief moves, not clean, not simple, but real. The particular bodily sensation of a weight that has been present for so long you forgot it was there until the moment it wasn't. Thank you, she said, for telling me directly. I've learned, Marco said, with something that was almost a smile, that you prefer direct. He went. She closed the door. She stood in the middle of her room in the Moretti estate on what would turn out to be one of the last mornings she would spend in it, and she allowed herself for approximately 4 minutes to simply stand there and feel the absence of the thing she had been carrying. Then she went to wake the boys. The weeks that followed were not simple. She had not expected them to be. The machinery of a 24-month consent decree and a criminal prosecution of an entire syndicate did not produce simplicity. It produced paperwork, legal consultations, the specific logistics of dismantling and restructuring things that had been built over decades to resist exactly that kind of process. Dante was in meetings daily, with lawyers, with Ferraro's office, with the financial oversight team the court assigned. with Marco, who was navigating the transition with the same controlled efficiency he applied to everything. Alara watched this from the margin and did not try to be involved in it because it was not hers to manage, and she had enough to manage in the parallel work of keeping the boys stable through a period that was, by any measure, a lot for 5-year-olds to absorb. She enrolled them in a school in Rome, not a Moretti-adjacent institution, an ordinary international school that smelled like floor wax and had a librarian who let Elias stay in at lunch to look at books about marine animals. Roman made 2 friends in the first week and then spent the second week determining which one he trusted more, which was so entirely Roman that Alara found herself laughing about it on the phone with Marco, who received this information with his customary gravity and said, "He'll be a good judge of character." His mother. Or a suspicious one, Alara said. Like his father, a beat, perhaps both, Marco said. She found them an apartment. Not on the estate was in the process of being assessed for the financial settlement and would be sold within the year. She found a place in Trastevere, 3rd floor, with a balcony that got morning sun and 2 bedrooms, with enough space for the boys to each have their own corner of the world. She told Dante about it over the phone. Trastevere, he said. It's central. Good school proximity. The boys like the neighborhood. You took them to look at it. Yes, before telling me. It's their home, she said. They get a vote. A pause. What did Roman say? He said the balcony was acceptable. She paused. He also said there should be a rule about knocking before entering rooms, which I took as a positive sign. He's establishing terms, Dante said. He's your son, she said. She heard something in the silence that followed something she didn't try to name. Is there room, Dante said carefully, for a conversation about where I am in relation to all of this? Geographically. Not he stopped. Not as a demand. As a question. That conversation, she said, is the one I told you we'd have when it was over. Yes, it's not over yet. No, when it is, she said, we'll have it. Okay, he said. She could hear in the single word how much it cost him to leave it there. She also knew that he left it there, that he didn't push. That mattered more than she was ready to say. The conversation happened on a Tuesday in late November. The boys were at school. Alara was in the Trastevere apartment they had moved in 3 weeks earlier, and it smelled like paint and the coffee she made every morning, and already, somehow like them, the particular lived-in smell that turns a space into a place. Dante came to the door. He had not been to the apartment before. She had seen him at the school, at handoffs, at one dinner she had invited him to because Roman had asked her to, and she had found she could not construct a reason that was good enough to say no. But he had not come here because she had not asked him, and he had not asked to come. She buzzed him up. He came in and stood in the entrance and looked at the apartment with the look of a man taking careful inventory, not appraising it the way someone assesses a property, but the way someone reads a place for who the person who made it is. It's good, he said. I know, she said. Sit down. She made coffee. She put 2 cups on the table. She sat across from him and put her hands around her cup and looked at him. The prosecution, she said. Where does it stand? Ferraro has everything she needs. The trial dates are set for next spring. My testimony is scheduled for March. He looked at his own cup. It will be in the papers. The name, the details. Some of it is already there. I've read what's there. He looked up. I know. I assumed you were following it. You should know that the boys haven't seen it, she said. I've managed that, but at some point they'll be old enough to look things up and find it, and we need to have thought about how we handle that before it happens. Yes, not today, she said, but soon. We need to have a plan. Yes, he said, together. She looked at him, that word, she said. Together, I need to know what you mean by it, what you're actually proposing. Not the version where you're careful about how you phrase it, the actual version. He held her gaze. I want to be near you, he said. I want to be the boy's father in the daily way, not the scheduled way. I want to have dinner with you and argue about things that don't matter, and knock on the door before I come in because Roman has rules about that, and I want to be in the same place you are at the end of days that are hard. He paused. That's the actual version. She was quiet. I'm not there, she said. Not to that. Not yet. I know. I don't know if I get there, she said. I need you to hear that. I'm not. She stopped. She found the honest word. I'm not closed, but I'm not open in the way you're describing. There's still... She pressed her fingers against the side of her coffee cup. There's still the bedroom door. That's still in me. It doesn't go away because you cooperated with a prosecutor. That, he said. I'm not punishing you, she said. I want to be clear that I understand the difference between holding on to something because it's protective and holding on because I'm punishing. I'm trying to be on the right side of that line. I know you are, he said. I can see you trying. She looked at him. Can you? She said. Yes, he said. I see you trying every time you invite me to the school things, and every time you include me in a decision about the boys, and every time you answer the phone when I call. He paused. I see you trying, and I'm not asking you to try harder or faster. I'm just asking you to tell me what you need. From me. In the actual present tense, she looked at her cup. I need you to keep doing what you're doing, she said. The consistency, the not pushing, the being there when Roman decides you've passed enough tests to be worth talking to, and the being patient when he decides you haven't. She paused. I need you to exist in our lives in a way that doesn't require me to be anything I'm not yet ready to be. I can do that, he said. And she stopped. He waited. I need you to understand that the moment I stopped being afraid of you was the moment everything got harder, she said. Because being afraid is simple. You know what to do with fear. You run from it or you manage it. But this, she looked up. This is harder. He looked back at her.
I know, he said quietly.
They sat with that for a moment. The apartment was quiet around them, and outside the Trastevere street was doing its morning thing voices. A scooter, someone dropping something on a floor above, and the ordinary sound of the city pressed gently against the window and did not require anything of either of them. Elias thinks you should come to Sunday lunch, she said. Dante looked at her. He mentioned it 3 times this week, she said. The third time he said 3 times is the number that makes it official, which I believe he invented. Did Roman agree? Roman said it was fine as long as you didn't criticize the pasta. I would never criticize the pasta, I told him that. She paused. He said he'd be watching. Dante looked at the table, and the edge of something moved across his face that she recognized as the face people make when something hits them in a place that surprises them. Sunday, he said. Sunday, she said. 12:30. Don't be late or Roman will make a point of it. He nodded. He looked at her for a moment. Thank you, he said. Don't, she said. Don't thank me. It's Sunday lunch. Just come. He came. He came the following Sunday and the Sunday after that and the Sunday after that. It was not simple and it was not linear. There were lunches that were easy and ones that were the particular work of 4 people in different stages of knowing each other, navigating around a history that was real and a present that was still being constructed. Roman tested him regularly, in the way Roman tested everything, setting small traps of consistency and watching carefully to see whether Dante noticed them and whether he passed. He passed most of them. He failed one. In the 3rd week, said something he shouldn't have said in a moment of impatience, and then sat with Roman afterward and said directly, that was wrong. I'm sorry. Roman had looked at him for a long moment and then said, okay. Don't do it again, and that had been that. Elias did not require tests. Elias had made his decision on the first day and was simply waiting for the rest of the situation to catch up. Alara watched. She watched and she worked and she translated documents and she made school lunches and she had the conversation with both boys about who their father was, not the full version. Not yet, but the true version. The one where she told them that their parents had been together and something had gone wrong and they had spent years apart and were now figuring out how to be in the same life again without pretending the apart hadn't happened. Roman had listened to this with his characteristic focused attention and then said, what went wrong? A betrayal, she said. By who? Your father. Roman was quiet for a moment. Does he know it was wrong? Yes. Did he say so? Yes. To me and to you. Roman thought about this. Okay, he said. People make mistakes. You always say that. I do always say that. But you also say mistakes are bigger than others. Yes, this was a big one, yes. He was quiet for a moment. But you're still figuring it out, he said. Not a question. Yes. Good, he said. Figuring it out is better than giving up. She looked at her son. Yes, she said. It is. Elias, who had been listening from across the room with the appearance of not listening, said, without looking up from the marine animal book, I already knew all of this. I know you did, Alara said. I was just waiting for you to say it out loud, he said. I know that too, she said. The estate sold in February. Dante called her the day it closed and said it in 2 sentences, and she said she was sorry, because she was in the complicated way you can be sorry about something you also think was right. Don't be, he said. It was a house. He stopped. I have what matters. She didn't ask him to explain that. She understood it. He had found an apartment in Trastevere himself. 8 minutes from hers on foot. She had not asked him to find something close, and he had not told her he was looking close. She had simply seen the address when he gave it to Marco for the new contact file, and had understood that he had made a decision about proximity without requiring her permission. She had not said anything about it. She had decided that was information she would sit with and see what it meant over time. March came, and with it the testimony. She did not go to the courtroom. She watched what the news reported and read the transcripts Marco sent her, and what Dante said in that courtroom was everything he had told her, and more the full 20 years, the operations, the choices, the names and the amounts, and the structures that had made up the life he was now deconstructing in public under oath. It was ugly reading. She read it all. She sat with it in the kitchen of the Trastevere apartment at 2 a.m. on the night Marco sent the transcripts, and read every page, and sat afterward with her hands flat on the table. She thought, this is who he was. Then she thought, this is the version of himself he chose to put in the record. He could have been less complete. He wasn't. The distinction mattered. She had enough experience with careful men to know that the degree of completeness in a confession is itself a choice, and what Dante had chosen to put in that record was the full weight of it, not the manageable version. She put the transcripts away. She went to bed. She did not sleep for a while. Spring arrived in Rome, with the aggression it usually did suddenly fully, the city shifting from gray to gold in what felt like a single week. The boys started spending afternoons in the small park near the apartment, and Dante started appearing there on some of those afternoons, sitting on a bench with whatever he was reading, while Roman and Elias used the space with the energy of children who had been inside too long and were making up for it. One afternoon in April, Alara came to the park after finishing work earlier than expected and found Dante on the bench and both boys on the climbing structure, and the particular domestic ordinariness of it stopped her at the park entrance. She stood there for a moment. She watched Dante watch the boys. The way his eyes moved between them, tracking, checking, the body-level attention of someone who has learned that these two specific people require monitoring, not because they're in danger, but because they are endlessly, specifically themselves, and he is unwilling to miss it. She watched Roman say something from the top of the climbing structure, and Dante look up and respond, and Roman come down 2 rungs to hear the response better. She watched Elias, who had noticed her at the park entrance, wave without interrupting whatever he was doing. She walked in. She sat on the bench beside Dante. He looked at her. Early, he said. Translation came in faster than expected. He nodded. They watched the boys. The park was full of the ordinary afternoon sounds of children and pigeons and someone's radio from a nearby window, and the city doing the thing it did, indifferent and ongoing. I've been thinking, she said. He waited. About the conversation we had in November, she said. The actual version of what you wanted. He was still. I'm not ready to be what you described, she said. Not completely. Not the end of Hard Day's version. Not yet, she paused, but I'm closer than I was. He looked at the middle distance. I know, he said quietly. I wanted you to know that I know it, she said. That I'm not standing still. That the trying is real. He turned to look at her. She looked back. The late afternoon light was doing the thing Italian light does in April, landing at an angle that made everything look like it was worth keeping, and it was in his face, and she looked at it and did not look away. I haven't stopped loving you, she said. That's the honest thing. I've never stopped. I've been furious, and I've been afraid, and I've been rebuilding myself from nothing. And through all of it, the love was still there, which made everything harder and not easier. She paused. I want you to know that I know that. He looked at her. He did not say anything immediately. He looked at her the way he had looked at that photograph in his study in Rome 5 years ago, with the particular quality of someone seeing something they had stopped believing they would see again. I'm not asking you for anything right now, he said. I want to be clear about that. He stopped. He found the honest thing. I'm not going to use what you just said as leverage. I know you're not, she said. He stopped again. Thank you for telling me. She looked at the boys. Roman passed his reading assessment, she said. Top of his group. He looked at the boys too. He didn't tell me. He was waiting to see if you'd ask. Another test, probably. He was quiet for a moment. Did he pass? You haven't asked yet, she said. You have until Sunday. Something in his face relaxed. Not completely, it never completely relaxed. She had come to understand this was simply how he was built, but enough. Sunday, he said. Sunday, she said. The Sunday lunch in May was different from the others. It was different because of what happened at the end of it. The boys had been outside on the balcony for the last half hour, doing something that involved Elias's current marine biology obsession and Roman's tolerance for it, which was greater than he admitted. Alara was clearing plates. Dante was at the sink, which he had started doing without being asked around the fourth or fifth Sunday, the same way he had washed dishes in cascades quietly, without ceremony, as if it were simply what happened after meals. She was carrying plates past him and she stopped. She didn't plan to stop. She stood beside him at the sink and put the plates down and looked at his hands in the water and then looked at his face from the side, the profile she had looked at for 3 years of her first life and 5 years of memory, and however many Sundays this made now. And she said, when Elias asks next time whether you're... He turned to look at her. Tell him yes, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. Are you sure? He said. No, she said, but I'm sure enough. He turned back to the sink. He finished the dishes. She stood beside him and dried them as he handed them to her, and they did this without talking, the ordinary domestic work of two people in a kitchen. And outside on the balcony, Roman was explaining something to Elias with considerable authority, and Elias was asking questions that were derailing the explanation, and Roman's voice was climbing the way it climbed when he was trying to maintain control of a narrative, and the sound of it came in through the balcony door and filled the kitchen with through the balcony door into the kitchen, their family. When the dishes were done, Dante dried his hands. He turned. Alara was looking at the window. He looked at the side of her face. He said she turned. He held out his hand. Not reaching for her, not taking, just held out, open, the way you hold something out when you are offering it, and leaving the choice entirely on the other side. She looked at it. She looked at him. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. Not tight, just present. They stood in the kitchen for a moment. Outside, Roman had apparently conceded a point to Elias, which she knew because the volume dropped, and she heard Roman say, in his most deliberate and ungracious voice, fine. Pishi is also a reasonable name. And Elias said with complete satisfaction, I know. And somewhere under the sound of her son, she heard the city outside and the ordinary afternoon of it. And she felt the warmth of Dante's hand around hers and felt the 5 years of distance in it and the years of not distance that were beginning, and she was not afraid. She was not all the way healed, and she was not all the way sure, and she was not the woman who had stood in a doorway 11 seconds too long before walking out, and she was not who she'd been in Cascades either, in the rented room with the 2 babies and the walking away money. And she was not even who she had been 6 months ago in a library in an estate that no longer existed, looking at a man who had just decided to dismantle his own life. She was the woman who had built something from nothing and survived it and walked back toward the hardest thing anyway, not because it was easy and not because she owed it to anyone, but because she had decided in the long quiet of the accumulated Sundays that some things are worth the risk of being wrong again. She turned back to the window. Dante stood beside her. The light came in. Roman appeared in the balcony doorway, looked at them, looked at their joined hands. And the expression on his face was the one he made when he encountered information he was filing carefully for future consideration, neither warm nor cold, simply present and taking note. He said, "Are you two just going to stand there, or are we having dessert?" "Dessert," Alara said. "Good," Roman said. "I'll tell Elias." He disappeared. Dante looked at Alara. She looked at him. She squeezed his hand once. Then she let go and moved to get the dessert, and he moved to help her, and the kitchen was full again, with the sound of the boys coming in from the balcony, arguing already about who got the bigger portion. And the argument was so entirely ordinary and so entirely theirs that she found herself laughing a real laugh, unprepared, the kind that comes from somewhere that hasn't hurt in a while. Dante looked at her. She shook her head, still laughing, and handed him the serving spoon. "Don't give Elias more than Roman," she said. "Roman counts." "I know," he said. "I've been counting." She looked at him. He was already turning to the table where the boys had arranged themselves with the air of people prepared to observe any inequity in the distribution of dessert with complete vigilance. She watched him serve her sons. She stood in the kitchen of the apartment she had chosen and looked at the table she had bought and the chairs she had picked for the morning light and the balcony door still open on the Roman spring afternoon. And she thought, you built this. All of it. Even the part that came back. She thought, this is yours. She brought the last bowl to the table and sat down. The four of them ate dessert in the afternoon light, and the city went on outside, and the conversation was entirely about marine biology and the correct naming of hypothetical cats. And the afternoon was warm and unhurried, and asked nothing of any of them except to be in it. It was not a perfect ending. It was not the story she would have written for herself. But it was real and it was hers. And when Elias leaned against her arm at the end of the meal with the bonelessness of a satisfied child, and Roman caught Dante's eye across the table and gave him the smallest nod, the nod of someone who has been watching closely for months and has. Arrived, provisionally and with full reservation of the right to revise, at something approaching approval, Alara felt the last of the running leave her body. There was nowhere left to go. There was only here. And here, for the first time in 5 years, was enough.